Welcome back to the Combo Couch, everybody. Pasta Jar Dooley here. Yes, yes. Hold your horses, ladies and gentlemen. Fiorella will be along shortly. She's coming directly from work. Guys, this is her return. She spent a week in the Donbass documenting and reporting on what she saw over there. She's going to be releasing probably another big special tonight. She's got a lot of footage that she's been collecting for her week stay there. And this is something she wanted to do for quite some time, to go in there and witness firsthand what was going on in the Donbass. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My partner, Convo Couch over 5 years, and RT analyst, desk person, whatever you want to call her, my fam, Fiorella Isabel. How you doing, fam?
Hey fam, I'm good. I'm tired. I got out of work. I rushed here. I've only had so much time to release some footage. I was with a team of people that were in Donbass with me, great people that really journalists and other type of like lawyer, one lawyer, one journalist, just different people that helped make this trip happen. And really, we have a lot of great footage that really drives some insight into this. So, yeah, I can't wait to release it all. I do work a lot this week, but I will be releasing some great interviews. Great in the sense of revelations, and terrible in the sense of what is actually being done. And I think that, every time we go to one of these countries that we go to, pasta in Latin America, we get the sense of what the US intervention has done. And this is no different to what's happened to the people in the Donbass. Particularly, I visited Donetsk and the areas surrounding Donetsk, which is it's very big. It's a lot bigger than we thought. And I'll be happy to talk more about that a little bit later.
Yeah, we have an amazing show today, fam. I'm sorry for throwing you right into the fire and getting the lineup hot right when you come back. Like, I don't even let you ease right into it. But some breaking news, fam. I haven't even got a chance to tell you. Very fortunate that they've asked me to speak at the Rage Against the War Machine event coming up. There's so many great people that are speaking. Actually, our guest today will be one of the key speakers over there, and just want everybody to put in their date right now. My friend Eric Jackman just called up, friend of the show. Rage Against the War Machine taking place. This is coming up on the 19th, as you can see right there. I think I don't get the right one up, do I? February 19th. We'll be talking more about that later. But that's pretty awesome. People like Jimmy Dore, Max Blumenthal, Daniel McAdams, Scott Horton, who's here with us today, Scott Ritter, Garland Nixon, all these great people will be speaking. And I think because some of the work we've been doing over here, fam, that we've kind of got the ability or the chance to go ahead and put our voices there. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, we've been putting together a lot of libertarians and anti-imperialist left to talk about foreign policy, to talk about the issues where we come together. I know Fiorella and I have a very strong feeling when it comes to our civil liberties and freedom of a press. And that's an area of common ground. There are differences, and today we'll be able to talk about some of those, but really get an idea of what's going on. I think it's a great problem to have. I was with some libertarians on Friday, fam, at the meeting here in Maricopa. We were screaming about our differences in economics, and we have to see what's going on to make sure. Wednesday, I put together a great panel. I wanted to show the difference between communism and libertarianism. So right now, Spike Cohen, David Smith are ready to sit there and have a conversation with Fiorella Isabel and Caleb Maupin. So we'll work out the times and the details. That's supposed to be this Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. We think these conversations are so important moving forward because it clearly seems to be, fam, them versus us, meaning the 1% that are tied to the military-industrial complex, big pharma, all these other groups that we have to battle up against. And you saw firsthand some of the devastation that could be caused in the war zones. So any thoughts on that coming up?
Oh, me?
Yeah, fam. We're going to bring our guest in right
Well, oh yeah. We'll have to see about that because I have a couple things going on Wednesday. But if I can't be there, fam, I'm sure Caleb knows more about the ideology than anybody I know. I mean, like if you want somebody to educate you on that, Caleb Maupin is the
now.
guy. Obviously, I tend to agree with a lot of what he says, not everything. I don't agree with everything anybody says. I mean, you're never going to.
Yeah.
That's not the point. But the point is, being anti-war and what that means to you, what that means to me, what that may mean to somebody else are two different things. For me, it means standing up against the empire. It means not allowing innocent people to die. And if that means that if if you're a person with a family, you're not going to stand by and allow uh, these people to come and take your life or to take your family's life. And what I witnessed there really puts that, even in, I've had this opinion before, as you guys know, but just going there really puts everything into perspective. Everything we report on, all the numbers, all the statistics that you get when you report the news, it's different when you see people.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an element of that there.
Well, like I said, there are some areas like, Medea Benjamin will also be speaking. We're not going to agree on everything, but I think there's a great discussions to be had. And I think this is a great area because seeing some of the rhetoric towards countries like China, like I'm going to ask Scott when he gets in here, are we getting closer to war with China? If you guys haven't gone to antiwar.com, please go to that. Just speaking with Kyle Anzalone the other day, Connor over there, Dave DeCamp. It's a great, great website. Please go over there and check it out. So, Scott, when you're ready, come on back in. We'll get you on in here, and we'll ask what is going on in Yemen. Should be the first question. Once Scott returns, he should be here. I see him in the... Scott, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. Having my video. Did it cut out? I was on there a minute ago.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Scott Horton is here. Scott, I don't know if you heard the news, but I'll be joining you on February 19th. I actually have a gift for you. I've been waiting to give you for a long time for that spanking you gave to Bill Kristol in that debate. So I look forward to seeing you, look forward to your speech. And I love what you have to say. We had a great conversation at Freedom Fest. How you doing nowadays, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Awesome.
Good, good. Yeah, ready to discuss war and peace, so to speak.
So let's start, Scott, because I haven't been talking about this for several months, and this is something you've been great upon. Yemen, okay? Remember when Biden got in, and he was like, we're going to stop this war, but it kind of changed tunes that recently I believe they were giving more weaponry to the Saudis. I don't know if it was Patriot missiles or something to be used against the Houthis. Can you give us an update of where we are right now in Yemen? Because I know it's kind of been like out of the purview of the mainstream media. It's always been out of the purview of the mainstream media, but it seems like the independent media hasn't picked up. Where are we at in Yemen?
Well, it's a relatively good place, actually. You're right that Biden broke his promise, his campaign promise that he was going to end the war. And he spent the first year, in fact, right after he was sworn in, about a couple weeks later, he gave a speech and said, I'm living up to my promise. We're cutting off all support. And then he did not do that. And so for another year, America supported Saudi and UAE at war against the Houthi regime there in Yemen. But then, no thanks to the Americans, or no specific thanks to the Americans, I don't think. What happened was last spring of 2022, in March, I think was the final straw. The Houthis got another successful drone attack off on an oil refinery right near Riyadh. And at that point, we have to speculate, but somebody in a white robe came in the room and told the crown prince, enough is enough. And you are now going to turn this damn thing off. And so that was what happened. The Saudis essentially took the initiative in response to that to go ahead and try to work out a deal. So the first thing they did was they threw overboard the former dictator that they had been trying to reinstall back in power, Mansour Hadi. And they told him, nah, you're not the guy anymore. And they appointed a new council of people to negotiate with, of their handpicked people, to negotiate with the Houthis on a new regime and power sharing deal. And then they negotiated a ceasefire that was officially a 2-month ceasefire. And then it was officially extended, I think, 3 times. I think it was. And then it was, last fall, essentially the thing expired, but they kept it anyway. And they've essentially been abiding by the ceasefire that, expired in, I think, October. And there has been, what they call low-level fighting and ceasefire violations, but there has not been a return to full-scale combat. Now, the Americans, to their credit, I think Blinken, and they have appointed this guy, Lender King. I mean, they're clearly on the Saudi side, but they always were anyway, right? But the point is that, they have not obstructed efforts to go ahead and bring an end to the thing. They have apparently been cooperative with that and in trying to, help negotiate a deal. But where we're stuck is that the Houthis are making more demands that the Saudis won't give into, but they're very reasonable demands, such as lift the blockade of this town where you have the highways closed, and pay the back salaries of all the government employees, the civil servants in Sana'a, which is pretty much in the middle of the country, the capital city, and all the land north of there that's been under Houthi control this whole time. Because back in, I think it was 2016, it might have been even 2015, the first year of this phase of the war, that they essentially stole the central bank and took it down to Aden, under the protection of the Southern, socialist. It's called the Southern Transitional Council.
Yeah.
They're the socialist, separatist group down there in cooperation with the UAE. And they ended up essentially seizing the central bank and then refusing to pay the salaries of any of the civil servants, the electricity workers and the garbage men and all that kind of thing. So in other words, I don't know the exact specifics of that, but the point is, whatever it is their demand is, we're talking about chump change in terms of money for the Saudis, and we're talking about a reasonable demand. We're not talking about, they're not saying they want to be on American welfare from now on and they want a battleship and whatever, crazy things. They're essentially, their demands are perfectly within reason. So it should be that they can bring this war to a close. And I think, it's a shame that the Congress, buckled under pressure from Biden. Everybody blames Sanders. And it's true that night, it sucked that he didn't even hold a debate and a vote at all. He just caved at the start of the night. But what really, frankly, he's the best guy in the Senate on this. He's been the one trying to lead and do something about this better than Rand Paul, who we know knows better, who's spoken on it and voted right on it before, but refuses to lead on it whatsoever. But what happened was Sanders thought he had the votes. He had counted up the votes, I guess, and thought he had them. But then Biden sent his men. I don't know who it was exactly, but they sent someone from the White House to Capitol Hill to make it clear that Biden is against this and does not want you to do this. Well, so it's the Democratic controlled House. So that cost them their margin right there. 10, 20, 30 votes right there. You're going to be crossing the president. This isn't in support of the president's policy. This is exactly what the president wants you to not do. And so that was what really killed it, was Joe Biden. But that would have put much more pressure. And really, see, if Joe Biden actually wasn't Joe Biden, but was just a decent human man sitting there, then he might have welcomed Congress voting on that war powers resolution, so that then he could say to the Saudis, come on, guys, you got to hurry it up and work this thing out sooner than later, because the Congress is after my ass here. Right. But he's not doing that. Instead, he said, no, that'll obstruct my effort. So, I don't know where that leaves us. It's better than it was, because at least right now, commercial and humanitarian relief is getting into the Hodeidah port. There is some air traffic at the Sana'a airport, and emergency food and medical aid is getting out to people. It's been a couple of months since I talked to him, but I have a reporter friend in Sana'a who, last time I spoke to him, I guess, geez, it's probably been since last fall. He was like, whoop-dee-doo, man, the war is over and everything is great. And whenever they finally come up with a peace deal, that'll be nice. But for now, it's such an improvement. To him, it was, springtime for Yemen. So, it's certainly, I don't want to say like all the hunger crisis is off. The people are desperately poor and their economy has been completely wrecked. They're dependent on food aid to keep them alive. But the good news is they're getting it, right? So it's no longer a genocide at this point. I don't know if it counts as famine anymore, but people, all the aid organizations say these people are desperately, what they call food insecure, and are desperately dependent on this aid. But it's very much the eye of the storm. And but it could go right back to blows. I mean, I don't know what's exactly going to happen here. But I think that was, the real reason it was so important to try to get that resolution passed, was so then the Saudis just would know that you can't go back to war. The Americans are just going to not pay for it. The American people are just going to not put up with it. It's over,
Fam, did you have any follow-ups for Scott? I have a couple in Yemen.
No, go ahead. In terms of Yemen, go ahead.
Well, I mean, Scott, that's some encouraging news. It looks like I'm getting closer to be able to maybe go to Yemen one day and do some GOT. That's what I really want to do. That's on my bucket list. I want to experience that with the people of Yemen. Have you heard any updates from Socotra, the island that's just south of Yemen that was supposedly under dispute? Because it looks like the UAE was giving visas to Israeli citizens to go there. And at one point, I believe before Houthi was removed, he was complaining, saying, you can't just do that. But it seems like a strategical island just south of Yemen. Have you got any reports on Socotra?
Yeah, I mean, for all I know, it's still under the control of the UAE and the U.S. Marines. I mean, that was, as soon as the UAE was there, they invited the Americans to come.
Sure.
So, I mean, I'd be amazed if they ever left. And as far as like Israelis visiting, I don't know if that's you're talking about the IDF or their Navy, or if you're talking about tourists, because Socotra is a beautiful place. So I could see it being like an exclusive retreat for the very rich or this kind of thing. But it's absolutely stolen property.
Wow. Fam, I wanted to ask Scott about China because I want to know if we're getting closer to a war with China. Fam, do you have any questions, or should we just let Scott just jump into that big question right there?
Well, yeah, Scott, are we closer to war with China? But also, what do you make about the hyper-partisan, Republicans, a lot more of them are speaking out against the funding of Ukraine and weapons to Ukraine, but simultaneously, the moment it shifts to it be China, they're ready to jump and start a conflict with China.
Man, ain't that always the way? That partisanship it's the mind killer. And you look at it from the point of view of anybody to the right of the center. They got that big red flag with the yellow stars. And just like with everything, TV news never explains, right? They never tell people, well, a little bit of context would be this, that, the other thing. It's always just a headline. So people don't really understand. But far be it from me to spin for the Communist Party dictatorship, one party dictatorship of China. But just the context is that they used to actually be communists, and they starved something like 30 million up to 40 million of their own people trying to accomplish a Marxist economic system there. And then finally, Mao Zedong died. And then the right wing of the Communist Party took over. Deng Xiaoping and his people took over. And they said, fine, to get rich is glorious. And, China has always been a very entrepreneurial culture anyway. So all they did was say, fine, you can own property and you can buy and sell things again. We'll get out of your way. And it took, really until the beginning of the 1990s before that actually had any effect. It took a long time through the 1980s for them to even get ready. But then we saw the most growth and the most improved standard of living for the most people in the history of humanity beyond anyone's imagination from, say, 1990 through the year 2000, and then from 2000 until now on the same steady increase. I know a businessman who used to fly into Shanghai when it was a tiny, I don't know, tiny, but essentially a town by our standards in the early 90s, very early 90s. By the end of the 90s, he said it was comparable to downtown Houston. It was unbelievable. In the space of 10 years, you couldn't make it up. It was a miracle. It's the best thing that ever happened to the most people who were living in the worst circumstances you could possibly imagine. And so essentially what China is now is, rather than a communist dictatorship, it's a fascist one, right? It's a complete combination between the government, it's the politicization of the economy, but there's still private property, highly regulated, of course, but it's a vast improvement over Marxism. So as far as, the unmitigated evil of the government in Beijing, it's a hell of a lot less worse than it used to be when you're grading literally on a curve from Mao Zedong, okay, which is the reality. And a lot of what the benefit to China during the last 30, 40 years has been because of capitalism and trade with the United States of America. They're our second biggest trading partner after Canada. And you're talking about bazillions of dollars invested in both sides, however many hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions maybe, invested by America in China, and that China has betting on selling to Americans in the future and the rest, and in this interdependent trade. So this should be looked at just like the peace pipeline, the Nord Stream pipeline between Germany and Russia. This should be looked at as the greatest invention in the history of peace. This is how we keep America and China from nuking each other, is all the billionaires in both countries go, no, we need those guys. We need peace. Remember when the spy plane got shot down in the spring of 2001, and Colin Powell went over there and shook hands and kissed asses and got those guys back. He didn't say, you better give them back or we're going to nuke you and all of this stuff, because that would have been bad for business. And so he went over there and he got the spy, or I guess they kept the plane, but he got our guys back and made the compromise. So that's how things should be. Okay. It's not perfect. I know that, if you look at the free trade agreement between America and China, things are very rigged and there's a lot of imbalance. There's a lot of corporatism and corruption there. But again, we're grading on a scale between not having trade between America and China, or like we're grading on a scale between Mao and Xi. Okay. And then, so now we have the question, the question of actually coming into conflict with China is most likely around. Oh, I'm sorry, because I mean to wrap up that thought. Donald Trump really changed this. Donald Trump came in and put much higher tariffs on China and deliberately broke our trade relationship with China. So think of it like this, guys. You got a college of billionaires who are deciding on the American imperial policy. Right. Some of these billionaires, their only interest is in selling planes to the military, selling ships to the military. Some of these billionaires, their interest is in more or less market activity, civilian supplies going back and forth between America and China. So which faction do you want to win? Do you want to destroy trade on a regular civilian kind of manufacturing basis so that the only very rich and powerful people in America who really have an avowed interest in China policy at all are people who want to sell boats to the Navy? I would rather have Walmart say, actually, Lockheed, we have interests here too, and you're going to have to tone it down some. And that's, again, we're grading on a curve, not libertarian paradise. But what we have with Trump, see, is a shutting down of more and more of that civilian type capitalism, and then a pouring of more and more money into the military industrial complex to try to make up for it. And Pete Navarro, and going back to Yemen for a second, Pete Navarro explained this in the New York Times, to the New York Times. Now, look, we put all these sanctions on China, which is so bad for American manufacturing. It's killing American manufacturing in all these different ways with all these second order effects. So what we're doing is we're pouring a ton of money into the military industrial complex to make it up to manufacturing. Right. So, which is still stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Right. He's destroying the washing machine company in favor of Lockheed. That's not manufacturing. Those are two totally different companies. In this case, it was Raytheon especially, and it was Raytheon that lobbied Pete Navarro. You have to veto the Yemen War Powers Resolution back in 2019. We have to keep the war in Yemen going because this is your policy to make industry happy after you screwed them through these tariffs. Right. So now that means that since from the time of Clinton through W. Bush and Obama, that era is over. Biden didn't come and undo what Trump did there. Biden has kept that same. People go, oh, Biden's such a sellout, compromised by China. Like, I'm sure he did corrupt business deals through his son and all that. I guarantee you every bit of that's true. Presume him guilty. That doesn't make him totally compromised and owned by them the way people think. He has absolutely as hawkish a policy as Trump, maybe worse. I don't keep count. The guys at antiwar.com the boys, Dave DeCamp and them, are doing a better job than me, but they can tell you the count of all the times that he sailed the Navy through the South China Sea and through the Taiwan Straits and all of these things. And he has accidentally, on purpose. Look, George W. Bush did this and Donald Trump did this too, but it was accidentally. They're just too dumb to know that you're not supposed to treat the president of Taiwan like he's the leader of a nation state. He's not. And they screwed that up because they didn't know what they were doing. But once their staff corrected them, then they got it. But Joe Biden, call him senile, call him America's worst China hawk. He is now, I'm sorry if it's 4 or 5 times. I think it could even be 5 times. He has accidentally renounced America's one China policy and the joint signed communique that America put out. It started with Nixon and then culminated with the Carter administration in the one China policy, which recognizes that Taiwan is part of China and it will always be part of China, but America would strongly prefer that they be reunited peacefully someday. Now, at the time that they signed that, America was, obviously China did have H-bombs, but other than that, they essentially had no power. So America had the ability to essentially dictate to them, you better not ever even think about it or think about building up to try it or anything. Well, China now has the capability to invade Taiwan. It would be a hell of a slog. They could, lay siege to it probably first, but they could attack, and they've been building up their forces to the point where they have the ability to do it. Now Biden, just like with Ukraine, it's the exact opposite of what you would recommend as diplomacy. Right? We can't appease Hitler. Everybody knows that everything is always 1939, and everybody that America is up against is always Hitler. And you can never give them anything because that's like Neville Chamberlain appeasing Hitler over Czechoslovakia, blah, blah, blah. And that's the way it always is. So if the Chinese are building up at all, we'll warn them, you better not. And we'll send more weapons to Taiwan, but we will not be conciliatory. And we will not say, actually, our law says that we recognize that Taiwan is a part of China and et cetera like that. Now, so sorry, I'm rambling, but let me wrap this up with Gareth Porter wrote a great piece about this. America had what they call the dual deterrence policy. They would tell mainland China, listen, you better not attack Taiwan. Okay. We're not promising what we would do, but we're just telling you, you won't like it. And so don't. That's still within the rules of the China communique and all that. The Shanghai communique.
Well, Scott, I just I'm sorry. I just want to say real quick. I disagree with you that China is a fascist.
Hang on, let me just finish this real quick.
Dictatorship. But
let me just finish this thought real quick, and then I swear I'll be quiet. Then it's the dual deterrence policy. They would tell China, you better not invade Taiwan. You better not attack Taiwan. And then they would tell Taiwan, you better pipe down, because we are not promising that we will defend you. So don't you go and act like your bigger brother has your back and that you can declare independence. If you declare independence, China is going to attack you, and we're not promising to come to your aid. So you guys stop threatening them, and you guys stop taunting them. But now America has dropped that policy. And under Joe Biden, the policy is that he has announced 4 times, we will defend Taiwan. In other words, don't pipe down. Go ahead and pick a fight. Your bigger brother has your back. Now, and there are radical forces in Taiwan who would prefer to declare independence sooner than later, even knowing that that'll pick a fight and probably be the single thing most likely to cause China to attack. And in which case, if America does go to defend Taiwan, we're going to lose. According to all the Navy war games, our boats end up at the bottom of the sea, and China ends up taking Taiwan anyway. So now I'll be quiet, and I'm sorry, man. Please go ahead.
No, I was going to say I 100% disagree that China is a fascist dictatorship, and that fascism is worse than communism. But that aside, you are against for intervention on China.
Well, just compare the starvation rates from when Mao Zedong and his wife were in power when tens of
Wait.
millions of people starved to
Right. I
death.
don't want to
There's
get into
Where does
there's
it
a
that.
actually
I
different
don't.
have
yeah,
a
and
That's
it's a
that's a
different
market
whole other
discussion.
value?
Yeah,
argument.
that's
That's a whole other argument. We'll
yeah.
be here all day if we get into that argument.
I want to save
But
it for
You're the one
geopolitics.
who wanted to argue about it a second ago.
No,
no,
no.
I simply mentioned that I disagree with you, because I have to say that I disagree with you on something that I think saying it's fascist, it's worse than communism, it's fascism. I just it's I agree with you that it's not a communist state. I agree with you that China engages in capitalism. But my point in saying this is to say that in spite of all the disagreement, you are against for intervention in China, for U.S. intervention in China for whatever reasons that you are for. Now, I want to shift to Russia, Ukraine, because I think we could be stuck in this loop all day. What is your stance then in terms of that conflict? Do you see it as both, these two powers, the United States and Russia, are trying to wage war against each other, and that Ukraine is this innocent, country caught in the middle? How do you see that conflict?
Well, I don't know about any state being innocent. Clearly, Ukraine is caught in the middle. I mean, just like in the case of Taiwan, those independence-minded politicians who are constantly taunting and provoking the Chinese are playing their own part in the thing, and they bear responsibility for that. And of course, there are all kinds of troublesome forces inside Ukraine. But the question, of course, is, America and Russia essentially are playing chess, and Ukraine is the board, or Ukraine is one of the pawns or the rooks in the game, right? Rather than the major players. And I honestly believe that, if America had just stayed out of Ukraine, just given them like what is known as the Finlandization or the Austrianization neutrality policy dating back to the last Cold War, and just treated them as a neutral state, I think Russia would have, a lot of influence, maybe even dominance in Ukraine. But I don't think that they would, absorb it, invade, conquer, take it back for the greater glory of the empire and all of that. Putin has really shown no uh, motive to do that the entire time. The same guy has been in power virtually 20 years uninterrupted here. He stepped aside for his right-hand man, Medvedev, for just a few years there back a decade ago. But clearly, as Barack Obama, as even Michael McFaul and all of these guys admitted, the only reason that he took Crimea back in 2014 was as a reaction to the overthrow of the government that America had perpetrated there. And clearly, it took him 8 years to decide to launch, or 7 years to decide, no, 8, to decide to launch this intervention, when he was insisting, I think quite frankly and honestly, on the implementation of Minsk II and the renunciation of NATO membership and avowed neutrality. You know, the Donbass has a lot of resources, but the Donbass also has a lot of old and decrepit industry and a lot of old and decrepit people. And so when Russia absorbs the Donbass, they're absorbing a lot of pensioners, and they're absorbing a lot of old factories that need millions, maybe billions of dollars worth of investment to get them kind of up to par. I think Putin was kind of happy to leave the Donbass inside Ukraine until, frankly, the Americans just forced his back all the way up against the wall. And the question was, well, are we going to do this now, or are we going to do this later when it's harder? Because the Americans have built up their military forces even more than this. And that's not to excuse what they've done. I argued with you before, Pasta, about, I think that Putin did have other alternatives that I do not believe that he exhausted before launching this attack.
Which were?
Well, for one example, I think he could have cut off all the gas to Europe in the middle of winter before last there in the end of 21, 22, and said, no, really, I'm serious, directly address the population of Western Europe and all that, that this is what we're talking about, is your fuel prices going all the way through the roof in the dead of winter. That would have been, I'm not saying I favor that, but I'm saying it would have been an option.
Isn't that what the United States wanted anyways too, as well? So they can be Europeans' daddy when it comes to energy. So
yes,
they would have,
absolutely.
I mean, I that seems like a tactic that would have failed dead on arrival, but please continue.
Well, I mean, the Americans, it depends. I mean, I think it could have helped to divide, from Russia's point of view, it could have helped to divide the Europeans from the American position on this. Because you're right. I mean, the Texans want to sell natural gas. That's why Ted Cruz is one of the worst on this. Even Rand Paul wrote an article about his friend Ted Cruz and how this is all crony capitalism. It's a speech he gave and ran in the American Conservative magazine, that a lot of this has to do with natural gas exports to Germany at incredibly high prices and all of that. But he could have also threatened to just obstruct any business going on the UN Security Council that the West was trying to accomplish. He could have demanded, and in fact, I think he could have just done it himself, right? He could have worked out a deal with a third country that is friendly with Russia but doesn't have a dog in the fight, say the Indians or something like that, and brought them in as UN peacekeepers. He could have fought like hell in the UN Security Council and demanded that third-party peacekeepers come in to occupy the Donbass, and in order to enforce Minsk II, like in the original deal. And
but even with us finding out that Minsk II was never, they were never serious about Minsk II. They were never going.
You're right.
Their whole objection was to make sure that they had this war. So, I mean, that once again, that seems like another tactic that on arrival. And I just want to explain.
Well, I mean, think about it like this.
Okay.
And look, I'm no master diplomat, but if he could have figured out a way to wrangle through either the UN Security Council or just through his own alliances in Central Asia, right? Bring in some peacekeepers from Kazakhstan or something. I don't know, Kyrgyzstan. They're friendly with the Russians again now. I forget who cooed who last. Bring in some guys who don't have a dog in the fight, particularly here, to just stand everywhere in baby blue helmets. That would immediately shut down Kiev's war against the Donbass. From that point, you can hold your referendums, do all kinds of things. But it would have the effect of ceasing that so-called low-level artillery war that was still going on across the deconfliction zone there in the east. I'm never going to condone what he did here. And look at the number of people who've been killed now. More than 100,000 people have been killed. This country just completely ravaged. The Donbass too, worse off than before by far. And you got back from there, you can tell me, but there had to have been another way for him to do this. But anyway, even that's just a parenthesis. My point is still that, they say the guy's a raving lunatic, psychopath, the most dangerous man in the world since David Koresh. And then what do? They do everything they can to provoke him. They do everything they can to insult him. They put his back up against the wall. He made very reasonable demands, such as that America live up to their promises that they made in the past. Like in the 1997 Founding Act, the Russia-NATO Founding Act, where Bill Clinton promised that he would not move Western military forces into the new NATO states. And they just break that like it's nothing. And when Putin brought it up, they laughed. They're like, 1997, like he was talking about 1897 and some broken old treaty that doesn't matter anymore. But they were the ones just breaking it. And, as you guys remember, during Trump, he tore up the INF treaty and was trying to tear up New START, the last major treaty limiting nuclear weapons. It was due to expire right after in early 21. And that's the greatest thing Biden ever did in his life, was save that treaty. When Biden came in, Putin said, let's save the INF treaty and let's save New START. And Biden said, well, okay, let's save New START, but not the INF treaty, not the Open Skies treaty, and certainly not, the ABM treaty that George W. Bush tore up in 2001.
Yeah. It's hard to disagree sometimes with you, because you prove a lot of our points as far as like United States foreign policy behavior to lead us to this way. And like I was telling Fiorella, I said, Fee, I think we disagree with Scott, but at least I think this is a better place to be disagreeing from, rather than that first part of the China-Russia situation, where we see a lot of populist conservatives or populist right, especially in Congress, like Matt Gaetz, like the Marjorie Taylor Greens, that I think would be okay with money taken out of Kiev and sent to Taiwan. I really do feel that sometimes,
I agree with you,
by listening to him. So I'm glad to have the debate from this point of view. But would you argue against my point saying that, well, listen, if you honestly believe in peace and you believe that if to be anti-war or to be pro-peace, you got to hope for the quickest way to a peaceful resolution, And I can't see any other way than what Putin is doing now. First of all, trying to get those blue helmets into the Donbass while that war was going on, I don't think that would have ever happened. I don't think any sound mind person would have been able to find a way to get the peacekeepers in there while that was going on, especially when it's armed Nazis like
well,
the
UN does whatever the United States wants. The UN does whatever the United States wants. So does every other peacekeeper in the world. That is part of the international US based order that they keep talking about. There's no real organization that is an actual peacekeeping organization at that level of government. So that's just not a reality. And to answer your question, the Donbass has been for 9 years really, really bad. But it is, as you said, an area of really rich natural resources. Not there were a lot of young people, but a lot of these people have left because of what's been going on by Ukraine with US and European supplied weapons, as you know, to the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars. Russia sees this as an existential fight for who they are as a sovereign country. And I just have to ask you, Scott, you believe in the Second Amendment, right? As do I. I believe we have a right to defend ourselves. If somebody were to come into your house and gun to your head, threaten to kill you and your entire family, you would just say, well, I'm anti-war. I'm just going to stand here and hope for peace and hope it comes? Or what would be your action?
Is that a metaphor, or that's just a personal question about home invasion?
Well, no, I'm comparing that because that's exactly what was going on in the Donbass for the last 9 years.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, we're talking about a fight between governments over sovereignty. So
yeah, but one's a puppet government,
right?
Stood up by the West. We know this. What happened in 2014 on the Maidan? I mean, we have we don't have just smoking gun evidence. We have bazooka evidence that this is a propped up puppet government specifically made to antagonize Russia and ethnic Russians on the border. Because who didn't want war was the people of the Donbass since 2014 until right now, and they were crying for Russia to get involved. Even Yanukovych, when he was fleeing, was telling Putin, you're going to have to intervene, otherwise these people will get slaughtered. So I think that what Fiorella is making is she's making a fair metaphor there and saying that something had to be done. But please,
how about this for metaphor? I mean, look in Foreign Affairs and the New York Times and the Washington Post and all over the place before the war, and they were talking about, yeah, we're going to replicate Afghanistan. We're going to lure that sucker Putin into a no-win quagmire. We're going to arm up an insurgency with stingers and javelins, and we're going to bog him down. We're going to drag this thing out for years till it weakens and bankrupts and destabilizes and destroys Russia. And he's going to take the bait because he's a damn fool. Watch him. And Putin himself said, I think they might be trying to provoke us into a costly attack. And then what did he do? He fell right for it. He got journed by the CIA, the same as Andropov did back in 1979.
Roles reversed, Scott, right? Roles reversed. How long would it have taken the U.S. to intervene had Russia armed Mexicans on the border or Canadians on the border over there killing Americans, right? How long would it have taken the United States to do what Russia did? Russia waited 8 years plus. So, well, I don't know.
Look, I mean, the real answer there is if Russia tried this in Mexico, America would nuke Moscow and maybe Mexico City.
Gotcha.
So they wouldn't be bogged down in any quagmire. They would just completely freak out and kill all of humanity is what they would do. And the Russians wouldn't even dream of it ever. And that's the real point here that people need to understand. Imagine a situation, just how completely stupid it is. It's like a Saturday morning cartoon. If I told you, no, the Russians are coming. Yeah, they're going to do a coup d'etat in Canada and set up a fascist regime there and start murdering people in British Columbia who won't go along with it. That's the dumbest thing anybody ever said. But that's what we're doing to them right now.
Yeah.
Completely the lack of self-awareness here on the part of the American people and the part of the American establishment, it is legendary, and it is the kind of thing that could lead to a real war between America and NATO.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like having a 10-year-old kid driving your truck. It's just these people are not up to the task of picking this kind of fight. And especially, look, America kills something like 3 to 5 million Vietnamese, Laotians, and Cambodians. right? In what was sort of kind of a proxy war with Russia. I mean, the Russians were back in Ho Chi Minh to a degree. But look at the map. There was an entire China between Vietnam and Russia. In other words, Russia didn't give a damn what happened in Vietnam. If they can help back Ho Chi Minh to help bleed us to bankruptcy a little bit longer, fine. But we're now fighting a Vietnam right on their their western border. And in fact, their southern border, you look at the funny shape of the map where Kharkiv is 300 miles due south of Moscow. Right. This is absolutely insane that they would be doing this. It should have been the moment hostilities broke out. In fact, even, because it was that funny kind of dual declaration of war. On the 22nd, he said, I'm going to the Donbass. And on the 24th, he said, I'm maybe going to Kiev. They should have been doing everything they could. Every major power on this planet should have had their ambassadors in a full court press to call a ceasefire and stop the fighting and figure out another way. You cannot have violent conflict like this on Russia's very western border. And they have a right to be paranoid. This country has been nothing but invaded, and in the land between their enemies and Moscow, there are no rivers, no mountains, no nothing, just wide open plains. They roll right in, and they've been invaded over and over and over again. That's why Stalin held on to all of Eastern Europe after World War II. So if I got to deal with the Germans again, they're going to have to get all the way across Poland, Belarus first, and Ukraine and Moldova and Romania and all the rest. They're going to have to start way the hell over there before they start rolling this way. And if you look at Putin's declaration of war, again, as I said over and over again, I don't think it's reasonable for him to declare war. But I think if you look at what he said in his declaration of war, every bit of it is rational. Every bit of it is, look, man, you really expect me to allow you to essentially integrate Ukraine into NATO? You don't make them a full partner, but you create this full interoperability with their military. You said you'd never do it. You swore you'd never do it, but then you put anti-missile launchers in Poland and Romania. So now you swore you'd never put anti-missile launchers in Kharkiv. You might. And those anti-missile launchers, the Mark 41 missile launchers, they can hold Tomahawk cruise missiles that can, be tipped with hydrogen bombs.
Yeah.
So these are serious security concerns. Anyone who says that this is just, Putin invokes these things as an excuse to redraw the Russian Empire or whatever, that's a bunch of crap. Those are the same people who told you Saddam Hussein's Iraq was about to attack us if we don't attack them first 20 years ago. These are just ridiculous lies. I'm writing a book about this now. It's called Provoked: America's Role in the Russia-Ukraine War. And it's about how this is all George Bush and Bill Clinton and George Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump and Joe Biden's fault and Putin's.
Well, I disagree a little bit, but I agree with a lot right there in that statement. And I think, it's I do believe the quickest way to peace is through a Russian victory, because I think that at the end of the day, the West wanted just endless war the whole time. So that's why I consider myself to be peaceful, anti-war, and justify. I don't want to say justify. I've always said you have to at least expect it, that it was going to happen when we were provoking on his border. Fam, do you have any more questions for Scott Horton before we get him on out of here?
No, we got a lot to cover.
We do. Scott, he will be speaking at the Rage Against the War Machine protest, anti-war rally on February 19th. It's a collaboration. Libertarian Party, the People's Party, they have demands. They have some great speakers there, and he'll be there. I'll be joining him. Jimmy Dore, Medea Benjamin, Daniel McAdams, David Swanson. We've been having these collaborations, a lot of libertarians. We'll get into the economics another time, because we can also talk about the social planning of China, which brought them out of poverty. But, I don't want to get into that now. We're going to have a good discussion on Wednesday when David Smith and Spike Cohen join with Kayla Maupin. At the end of the day, I think there's a lot of us. I think it's the 99% and the 1%, and we all want peace. We don't want this foreign policy going crazy, whether it be anti-imperialist leftists or libertarians like yourself, Scott. Thank you so much for joining the show. Where else can we find some of your work? Antiwar.com. Got a great article right now Connor put up about the fact that the Germans are kind of balking on giving the tanks over to Ukraine, and they won't even give it to a third party like Poland. So that's interesting. I think Germany's starting to get a little cold feet here. But anything else to say before you get on out?
Just, can you imagine the absurdity of that? The Americans are so mad as they're trying to prod the Germans into essentially attacking Russia. And, you know, they took Stalin's side against Hitler, but they're willing to back a bunch of Hitler-loving Nazis like the Azov Battalion against Republican Russia with their red, white, and blue flag and their essentially center-right corrupt capitalist economics. Are you kidding me? And they're going to sit here and stomp their feet that Germany is taking too long to remilitarize and adopt an aggressive foreign policy.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, I don't know what to say, man. Tune in to the show if you want to listen to more of this absurdity on my end.
Check out Scott Horton. Well, I would argue, Scott, that capitalism always turns into fascism, which is corporatism coming from Mussolini's mouth. And
that's why you got to abolish the state. You can't get rid of markets. You got to get rid of the state.
Well, we love you, Scott. Come back and see us again soon, brother. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
You got it. Scott Horton, everybody. Fam, you're back. That was Scott Horton. Like I said, fam, it's a good problem to have when you're disagreeing on that end of the spectrum. I disagree with Scott. And, you know, a lot of what he talks about is kind of backing up our reasoning and our theories for why we think that, you know, Russia was justified for doing what they're doing. He's writing a book called Provoked. But, you know, I mean, hey, that's the good side to argue from, fam. Anything else about that?
No, I mean, I obviously disagree ardently. This is why I'm not a libertarian, and this is why I'm not an anarchist, because I just think, like, it's all about every state is corrupt, blah, 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 blah. Like, you know, I mean, I could go on. I could have that debate for hours with somebody, but that's you know, I mean, you're against intervention. Okay, I'll take that. I just think the way you get to it is completely different. And I see that with, you know, elements of the right, elements of libertarians. They're against intervention. Cool. I want to hear what they have to say if they're against intervention, even if it's not for the same reason I am, even if it's not under the same parameters. Yeah, I mean, it is difficult to hear some of the stuff that was said, just very much like, this is why I think people need to go to the countries they talk about, to the places they talk about, because I think it's important to get that perspective, to really understand what is going on in these countries, rather than coming at it from, well, you know, I think this X thing because this is what I think. It's important to go to these countries and to understand why people are acting the way they are, why certain things are happening. Because for the chessboard situation, he explained, you know, it's the U.S. and Russia on the chessboard, and Ukraine's just caught in the middle. No. The chessboard is Russia and the collective of NATO, and the United States, the EU, the Five Eyes, and Ukraine, just a chess piece on that board. And that is the fight. It's not, you know, it's literally like what people here see it as, what people in the Donbass see it as, is a fight for the existential existence, not just of Russia, but of humanity. They see themselves as opposing this global order. And by the way, Russia has come out against the use of digitalization of IDs into that, the enforcement of that. Russia has come out against that. And I think a lot of people who are trying to push this narrative that none of it matters, these all people, or this is all theater, blah, 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 blah. You know, not necessarily Scott, but other people that I've seen write articles and stuff. I don't know off the top of my head who they are, but they've just been pushing like that this is all the same and blah, blah, blah. I disagree with that notion, because I see it being completely different, and the people who live here having a completely different perspective, having the same perspective that we have, that this is a fight that's more than just a fight for geopolitics. This is a fight for humanity. They see this as a spiritual war in some cases. fighting for what it is to be human, and against what many here call these globalists. You have, the Putin type of Russian politics, where they really talk about in these terms, where, we've talked about vaccination, we've talked about people, them being against that. And then there's the more, Soviet era. Either way, it doesn't matter. They're both fighting against the collective evil NATO, and what that means for Russia as a people and for the world. That's what's at stake here for a lot of people. So I think that I will start by talking about that, right? So I went to the Donbass for about 6 days. Well, a little bit less, because just so you guys know, because of the sanctions, because of the conflict, you used to be able to take a plane and then go to the Donbass essentially in a matter of hours, 2, 3, 4 hours tops, depending. Now it takes a train. It takes a train, and then driving into the border, or finding a bus into the border. It takes, a lot. There's a lot of security. It's a lot of work to go. It takes like over a day of travel now because of everything that's going on. And it's unfortunate, because it shouldn't be that way, but that's what we're doing. So it's very hectic to actually go there. But I did manage to go in between the time I work at RT and the time I have off. I managed to go. I'm one of the few people who wants to go. I mean, a lot of people just, don't want to go. They're afraid. It is a war zone at this moment. My hotel was shelled previously, not when I was there. It was shelled previously. In fact, most places in the entire city of Donetsk, which is where I went, because you have to understand the Donbass region is divided into several little districts. You have Mariupol, you have the Donetsk city, you have other parts of the Donbass, and so you have these areas that are divided. And then, of course, you have Lugansk as well. And so they were the Donbass People's Republic, and now, of course, they joined the Russian Federation because they had the referendums and they voted in favor to join, right? So when I was on my way there, I was told it wasn't safe to take an American phone. We know this through the past, where the Ukrainian service, the army, but the SBU has been able to triangulate the coordinates via pinging of these phones from towers and stuff. So it just wasn't safe. It's not safe. Even if journalists do it, it's not really safe to post from a phone on Twitter or anywhere else, because they can find out where you are. And then not only are you putting yourself in danger, you're putting others in danger as well. So there's that. So I didn't take my American phone. I went with my Russian phone. And then, by the way, Russian phones don't really work in Donbass as well, because it was a whole other company. So I wasn't aware of that. So I found that out very quickly. So I really had like no access to anything. But I was able to really immerse myself in what was happening in the moment. And I think that's important. And the information I'll be releasing is really just ties everything together. So it was extremely life-changing. It was extremely, putting faces and putting people to the conflict that we see as a conflict from the West, especially if you're in the United States. Oh my God, Russia, Ukraine, you hear these numbers. Oh, the expansion of Russia, they went here, they went there, they're expanding west, Donetsk, and you hear these places and the names, and even reporting about this stuff on RT when I do go to work every day. It's one thing, but when you're actually there and you see what actually is, and you start hearing these bombs go off. And throughout the week, guys, I'm going to be bringing more footage. I literally did not have time. I arrived last night, went to work today, and now I'm here. So I really haven't had time to go through the footage, but I did a massive photos and videos of everything I have. And the internet service, of course, wasn't good on the trains either on the way back, but I did post what I could. So there's that. And I just wanted to show you guys, this is the monument of the children of the Donbass. This is a child protecting, a young girl. And this was in Donetsk. And you can see this in one of the main squares of the park. And I posted this photo because I want to highlight the fact that children were the main victims of this entire thing for the last 9 years. The Ukraine, and more evidence has come out, and I will talk about that in a second, that Ukraine has been using civilians as human shields, the same way we've seen that they've accused Palestinians of doing this, but this is actually a time when this has actually happened, where they use civilians as human shields. So that monument was made for them, and because a lot of the schools have been shelled, because a lot of these kids that grew up in the basements or were stuck in these basements haven't been able to have a normal childhood. We can talk about the physical wounds, but we haven't been able to even begin to assess the psychological trauma that happens in areas. And a lot of people, who have gone to Donbass, like Eva Bartlett and Vanessa Bealey, talk about Syria, because it's similar. People living in these conditions. Now, I want to stress one thing, and I will have more footage of this, just so you guys know. People don't talk about this, fam, before I get into this particular thread. There is no water in Donbass like normal. Like you can't just open your faucet and get water, because Ukraine shelled the water pipes that are coming from Kiev into Donbass. So there is no water. So even for a journalist that stays in a hotel, you have water twice a day, maybe for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. No, the water is mostly not warm, it's actually cold. So if you miss that time for whatever reason, you don't have water, you have to go collect water, which there are stations where people go and collect water, or you will go to a market and buy it. Now, people have been going to markets that are open, and they also get shelled at markets. So just to put this into perspective, so you go to a market, you get your jugs of water. They sell them like here in Moscow. They're about this big. They're like squares. And so I had to, brush my teeth by pouring water into a cup, and wash my face by doing that, take a shower by doing that. If you have to flush the toilet, you have to do that. You don't realize how we take for granted just something as simple and basic as having water, until you actually have to literally have it. And the only other time where I've had to use buckets of water to flush toilets was in the little town Pasta that we went to in Bilwi in Nicaragua, in certain sectors of Nicaragua that of course were hurt by the hurricane, or that didn't have the infrastructure and that have been rebuilding. Of course, Nicaragua is sanctioned by the United States. So I just want to put that into perspective. Now, Russia is attempting to build ways to supply water, obviously, now that they are part of the Russian Federation, to the Donetsk and Donbass in general. But as of now, you just don't have that access to water. So I just want to reiterate that, because it seems so simple, but nobody talks about it, probably because it's like the least of their worries uh, in terms of its water. But it is a basic human need for survival.
Should we play this video real quick?
Well, yeah. So really quick, let me just start at the beginning, right? If you scroll at the top, to the top. So this is an apartment building, right? And on Monday, January 16th, a week ago, Ukraine fired U.S. supplied HIMARS rockets, which are a type of MLRS. So these are the rockets that are huge, and they leave giant dents in the ground. So this was a apartment building, pharmacy, and this was on Ilyich Avenue in the center of Donetsk City. And you guys can see the damage. We went there on Wednesday, and it happened Monday morning at around 8:30 in the morning. And so that's what we saw. Surreal to be there. It's one thing to see it here. It's another thing to be walking around it, seeing just a bunch of papers and people's belongings. And then you'll see people walking who live there, who are trying to figure out if they can salvage anything. Imagine that your house gets bombed. You have important documents you need, your identification, whatever valuables you may have. You're going to see if you have anything there. Well, that's what happened. And on the other side, and we'll see that in the video, is just shops. And let's just go ahead and play this, and you can see what we were told and stuff. U.S.
applied HIMARS.
Yeah, and 3 people die here, and one girl was just staying here for yesterday and waiting for her mother, but he's also dead. It was HIMARS.
And when did it happen? And what specifically was this before?
Uh, it happened on Monday. It was some flats and shops on first level. It was shops, and other level, as you see, it's some usual flats for citizens. It happened on Monday. Hammers strike here, and you can see nothing left.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one instance. I have more footage of a hospital that was bombed. Um, just so you know what's coming up. A hospital that was, and they knew it was from Ukraine because of again, just so people know who say, well, how do you know that it was Ukraine and not Russia? Um, HIMARS are not used by Russia. Right? Those weapons are U.S. supplied. There's just no denying that. Now, like I said, reporting on this stuff is one thing. Looking at it from a studio from a different way is one thing. Being there and seeing that this actually is real, that this is actually happening, that this just happened, and then also going into the shops and nearby shops and seeing people go, shopping, and then thinking to yourself, at any moment there could be a shelling that happens, and that's people tell you this all the time. People that I went with have been there before multiple times, and they said, like I was caught. I got lucky one day. I left my hotel. I came back. It was shelled. Or my friend who lives there, he left his house for the first time, and it turns out his house got shelled. Just these stories that you keep hearing, and people don't exaggerate when they say this is a war zone, that in spite of the fact that most of the fighting has moved west and further south, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Like I said, that incident happened Monday, a week ago now, 2 days before I arrived there. So just the day I actually started departing into Donbass, it happens. So this stuff happens. This isn't just something that people are reporting. It's kind of like when something happens to you and you say, oh, like so and so died from a drug overdose, and then it's one thing when you hear about somebody and then it's like somebody or something close to you. It's like that. It just really shifts the entire perspective on this whole thing. Fam, did you want to say anything before I continue?
No, please continue to go. I'm just listening to everything you got to say, fam. Please.
So
This
while
is
this
the
has
manipulation part. So yeah.
Yeah, so while this was happening, right? This happened on Monday. The weekend before that, there was this huge thing that happened, and I had reported on it on RT before I left. And so there was the Western media was fixated on this media spin that Russia had struck an apartment building in the Dnieper. Okay. And I don't know if I think most people remember this, right? If you go online and you Google Russia apartment building, you will get all of this, right? 40 dead in Russian missile attack on apartment building. Poland urges Berlin to give tanks to Ukraine because Poland keeps pushing Germany to give these specific tanks to Ukraine, and they're still pushing and pushing and pushing. Germany is hesitant. They still haven't said they will, but this is what they're doing. CNN, January 16th, 2023, Russia-Ukraine news. What we know, a Russian missile strike on an apartment building in the Dnipro center of Ukraine left at least 40 people dead, one of the deadliest single attacks of the war. So you keep going. And so, when most of the people I know, including some of my friends who don't follow politics, they they see this on the news, they're like, whoa, Russia, hit this apartment building in Ukraine. Like, I don't understand. And so this is what they see, because this is what's literally pushed out in media, the same exact story all over the place. And you see it everywhere, the same type of titles. The death toll from 40 from Russian missile strike on Ukraine apartment building. I mean, this is Voice of America, of course, but you get the picture, right? So it turns out that according to Ukraine's own people, the people responsible for those 40 dead people in the Dnipro region was actually Ukraine, because Ukraine attempted to shoot at this missile. Now, I reported on this, I think, a day before I left, if that. And because Russia says we don't target civilian areas, and that Ukraine did this because it was caused by their air defense shooting down a Russian missile over the city. But this missile was headed towards Ukraine's weapons, completely far away from residential areas, because again, according to international law, you're not supposed to hit civilian areas. That's not according to the laws of war, right? But a Ukrainian official actually agreed. Alexei Arestovich agreed. And Alexei Arestovich was subsequently canceled by the entirety of these pro-Western neocons that literally were upset that he actually told the truth for once, and his entire Instagram was actually taken off of online in Ukraine. So just so you know what's happened so far, completely canceled. He said, "Oh, they took my words out of context. What I meant was blah blah blah." But what I said was that he kind of went back and forth, but he said what he said. And he also has said before, by the way, that Ukraine doesn't have a chance to win this war. He also said that as well. But let's go ahead and take a look so you guys know what I'm talking about here. This is a Ukrainian official that said this, okay?
A tragic incident also occurred in the city of Dnipropetrovsk, where a residential building was partially destroyed by a rocket. According to local officials, at least 20 people died, with dozens more injured. Ukrainian officials were quick to blame Russia of intentionally striking civilian buildings. But Moscow has repeatedly stated it only targets military objects and infrastructure used by the Ukrainian army. It comes as one of Zelensky's advisors contradicted the official narrative, saying that Ukrainian air defense caused the incident.
The missile was shot down, but it fell on the building. It exploded when it fell down.
The Russian military has previously said that Ukrainian air defenses have been ineffective, citing examples of missile defense rockets hitting civilian buildings in the country, as well as neighboring states, when a Ukrainian rocket killed 2 farmers in Poland in November of last year.
Right, so this is what always happens all the time. So Ukraine, in an effort to say Russia did this, they know that it's not going to work. They know they know it's ineffective to hit these Russian missiles aimed at their armory, their weapons. But they also know that in doing so, that Russian missile that's aimed at their armory will go to the, instead of their armory, it will go to these areas where civilians are, and they're willing to sacrifice the people of these areas, their own people, to blame Russia. That is what I don't know if anybody said it as cut and dry as that, but that's essentially what's going on. So Ukraine is effectively sacrificing civilians in order to formulate a way to blame Russia for this stuff, because the whole point of this conflict, it's supposed to be you target people's weapons, you target these areas. But time and time again, proof has come out, and most recently via Sky News, which just happened today. I just reported on it earlier today. There is proof that Ukraine has been putting their weapons near residential and civilian areas. This is coming now from mainstream media. Some officials of Ukraine have admitted this. So again, this isn't the first time. And so Arestovich, of course, said that it was shut down, but it fell on the apartment block. It exploded when falling. And again, so he was not allowed to say that. He said the quiet part out loud. So as I said, he was canceled and completely just blasted online by people saying he should be, imprisoned, saying he should be, excommunicated. I mean, people just went all out against this, right? And so the reason I talked about this was because while people were focused on that in mainstream media, hardly anyone was reporting on a actual target via HIMARS, U.S. supplied weapons in the people of the Donbass in apartment buildings. There was literally, I was there. It's the middle of the city where there's a main avenue and there's apartment buildings, there's shops, there's this and that. There is no weapons there. There's nothing there. There's no justifying why would you mainly accidentally think that there's weapons. It would be like attacking the middle of your downtown area of whatever town you live in. That's what it would be like. So there's no justification of that. There's no way to say, oh well, maybe they thought. No, like this actually happened, and all of that was ignored because everybody was focused on, oh my God, Russia did this. And that is how you get manipulated. And that is why I don't see this conflict as an equal conflict. I see it as Israel versus Palestine, not to the extent of, this being an open air prison, by the way, but to the extent of where people try to equate this in the same vein. And it's just not in the same vein, because there is one side that is literally okay with killing civilians and justifying it. And there's one side that isn't. And I think that, it's really ignorant to really try to use that whole, well, I'm for peace. So I think, again, I urge anyone who has a child, even a pet, a family member, if you're just going to stand by and let somebody come and kill those around you. These people have more resilience than I've seen, just so many. I see it in all the countries that are affected by NATO, by the United States, by intervention, by sanctions, by blockades. I see it in the people of these countries. I've been to enough countries to see that resilience. That doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean that these people aren't forever traumatized, forever hurt, forever. We have never in the United States lived an ounce of that. We haven't. And that is why people in the United States aren't out in the streets because you don't know what it's like to live like that. I don't even know a couple of days without water, we were all like, oh my God, this is so difficult. It's like I wanted to slap myself, but these people have lived it like this for 9 years, for 9 fucking years.
And you have right here, fam, in this last tweet, I have much more to report, and we'll follow up with another thread on more civilian targets and interviews. I just want to remind everybody, the audience, that Fee just literally got back into town, had maybe a couple eyes of shut eye, and then had to get to the studio, do some work, and it's here again. A lot of people have been saying they can notice the hard work you've been doing and seeing it, and it's quite amazing, fam. And I can't wait to hear more and see more with what you got. I put up the Scott Ritter video on Sunday, so it'll be nice and fresh towards today about will it be justified. We clipped it out, and it's out separately. It's an 13-minute clip, excuse me. If you guys want to go on to that, and Scott kind of goes into the justifications of why Russia invaded or military action. And I believe I stand firmly on that. The quickest way to peace is through a Russian victory, because the United States, all they wanted was endless war. They wanted war. That's their goal, and it's to bleed Russia. So another people who didn't want war, for all the anti-imperialists out there, or the anti-war people out there, excuse me, are the people of the Donbass, where Fee just went to, and get to see them. So if you ever get a chance to go in there and see them, you might change your tune differently. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, fam.
And just a couple more things I want to say that people may not know. Donetsk has this black soil, okay, in the southern part of now the Russian Federation. There's this, it's a lot warmer than Moscow. It's about like 20 degrees warmer. I mean, it's just so much nicer. The sun was out. It wasn't like warm by like our standards, but it was definitely warm by 40 degrees and up.
Fam, I have to just grab something for 2 minutes. So if you can go on for about 2 minutes, I'll be right back.
Yeah, so it's a lot warmer in the south, right? You're much closer to Crimea. You're much closer to the Black Sea, you're closer to better weather. So there's this black soil that is located in this region. It's extremely fruitful. It's where so much grows, okay, in the southern part of the entirety of Russia, but also in parts of what was Ukraine. And that part is what gives food to the rest of the country. It'd be like the Midwest or the parts of California in the United States. So that is really good natural resources that you know who wants to get a hold of. Then there's also minerals, coal. There is just a plethora of natural resources. And before this conflict, before 2014, they used to have an amazing train system. Donetsk and used to have an amazing train system. They used to have more restaurants, more just urbanization, growth, and building than actually Kiev itself. Kiev wasn't even as well situated as these parts. And the thing is, most of the buildings that when you drive through Donetsk, you see were made during the Soviet Union. They were not made during when this was a part of Ukraine, because remember, Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. And then afterwards, of course, there was independence. And then that, since Ukraine took hold, they didn't really do anything for the people of the region. Like there wasn't much that was done, but there was a lot that had been there through the natural resources. And so that area, of course, had a lot of people who felt they were ethnically Russian, as we've talked about at length on this show. And these people who felt they were ethnically Russian were really, really had this culture. They were Orthodox. They had this, this proximity to Russia, but many of them have relatives on the other end of the spectrum. This is one of the things that I found that I've talked about before from people in Moscow having relatives in Ukraine, but this happens in the Donbass as well. A lot of people didn't want to talk to journalists because they have family on the other side. This isn't, you kind of feel like a dumbass coming in there and asking questions just so we can tell the story to you guys, just so we can really expose the truth. Because what these people go through, for example, like I said, what I have coming up is released prisoners from war, prisoners of war, that talk to us, and you will see in their faces, you will see in the face of these people the trauma they've endured.
On
their
the
eyes are
Telegram channel?
No. I'm saying what I have coming up.
Oh, okay.
You're gonna see these. You're gonna see these. The way that the toll of that. Then there was, of course, Soledar. As you guys know, Soledar was liberated and is now completely taken over by Russia. It's a Russian-controlled area, right? And so now the people from Soledar came a few talk to us, and you will see that footage as well. So this is from Intel Republic, and I just want to reiterate this news that came out, right? So Sky News couldn't hide, right, the hidden Ukraine tanks. And if you just scroll down, there we go. Tanks and other armored vehicles concealed among buildings in Artyomovsk in the Donetsk region, ex-Ukraine residential area. So these, of course, are what I was talking about here. They will hide these weapons in residential areas. They will use people as human shields. More and more information is coming, this time from Sky News as well. So I just want to reiterate that for the public so you know what I'm talking about here. But if you haven't seen that, watch RT. We've literally been covering it all day, as well as just more revelations of things that are coming out. That, of course, RT is censored everywhere. And as I put, I think I have a link there. RT France had to shut down because their bank accounts were frozen. So this is again what we're up against. People act like, oh yeah, she's a Russian propagandist. Guys, like at any minute, anything with RT could be shut down in terms of, because look what they did to RT America, look what's been done, look at how it's censored. Look at the labels that I get, the labels that many of us get. And so it's not like this is like this isn't the place you go to work because you want some sort of, like, it's not like CNN or BBC. Like, if you want you to be, a high paid stooge, you go work there. This is
Fam, you're not
not,
doing it for the
it's not
finances? Is
easy.
that what you're telling us, fam? You're not doing you're not wait, you're not taking me on a vacation this year with the extra money?
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So
Well,
stupid.
Cuba will be
Yeah.
but and it's like, and I did this on my, I did this with on my free time, not with RT. I did this on my own, but this, I think it's so important that more people do this, whether you're a journalist. You don't have to be a journalist. You can be a citizen journalist. You can be whoever. Go to these countries, go to somewhere where you're discussing the information, go to those places, because it's so important to really open up your eyes to seeing what is on the ground. And we've always advocated that. From the moment we were in LA, we would go to these meetings, we would go into the Democratic Party, we would go into the events that were happening all around our community. And now, of course, it's expanded to international work that we do. So, and the reason we do international work, it's because our foreign policy is our domestic policy. And this is our foreign policy at play here.
It's clear this grueling fight is morphing into urban combat. Inside the city, Ukrainian forces are making fortifications. Lines of Soviet-era tanks and armored vehicles are concealed amongst the buildings.
Did they
Right,
just incriminate themselves there?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean,
they
they just
can't.
incriminated themselves. Oh no, no, we're not putting military near people. You just said lines of Soviet-era tanks that are owned by the Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's like, hello.
Yeah.
Well, let me bring up the RT France stuff too, fam, because I think that's important as well. So, because freezing bank accounts, and listen. When we get into the next topic too, as well, we're going to talk about censorship in America and how it's even baked into the conservative side, right? In America, because a lot of people think that, they were just going to Rumble and Getter to get away from Twitter, to get away from YouTube and have our own voices. But no, it's baked in. What do you see as the pros and cons? I don't want to say pros, but what are the cons of shutting out Russian media more than anything? Because a lot of people would justify and say, yeah, well, they shouldn't be able to spread their propaganda. It's good that we censor them. It's good that in France they've shut down RT France. What is your pushback to that?
I mean, it's obvious, right? Like, what propaganda? Why is it counter-narrative propaganda? And what about the propaganda from the West that doesn't get labeled, doesn't get in any way questioned? And when you question it, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're, a right-winger, you're a Putinist, you're a Hitlerist, whatever, you're a Zionist. No, not a Zionist, anti-Semite. You get labeled all these things, but they never get questioned. They get, we fact-checked you, so you're wrong. Like, it's ridiculous to me. If you want to call Russia Today propagandists, then call everybody else a propagandist. And then I go back to, do you expect Russia to constantly, badmouth themselves all the time? Like, and the thing that irritates me the most is being here and seeing how careful Russia is to make sure that they're not just like that. They still, a lot of people that work here still look at the BBC. They still look at the Washington Post. They still think that there can be diplomacy reached with the West. And like I said, in some ways, I'm more anti-West than some of these Russians are, because that's just because I know how the West is and what they've done. And the Americans that are here are the same way as I am, because we know we come from the belly of the beast. And Russians overall, they don't hate Americans. Neither do they hate Ukrainians. Neither do, I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, these people, they don't hate Americans. They understand what the U.S. government is doing, but the vast majority, I haven't heard them say, you know, Americans this or that. Like, it's actually quite the contrary. They're much more accepting and diplomatic than I would be if I were them. And that's something that I find really enraging when I hear people say, well, RT this and that. I mean, they do a lot more fact checking than the idiots who almost got us into World War III by saying this missile came from Russia and was trying to hit Poland. Those are the people that the AP, the Washington Post, the New York Times, or how about the Guardian and the Washington Post, the New York Times, who really pretty much republished what Julian Assange published, and they were let out completely scar-free while Julian Assange is still in Belmarsh prison facing 175 years for the truth. And that's what I want to say to those people. It's a double standard. They're hypocrites. They're sellouts, and I think history will not be kind to them. It's, you know, as more and more of this conflict gets unraveled, they're on the wrong side of history. If you think that Russia was not justified in what they're doing, you know, in a way, I do think you're on the wrong side of history. But if you are spouting that narrative of Ukraine is this and that, and Hitler, Putin is Hitler, and all this stuff, and like, you know, these Russians are so evil, you're on the wrong side of history, because these people are just like any other people in any other country. They have the same goals, the same aspirations. They just want to be sovereign. They want to be able to determine their own future. That's really the question of sovereignty was talked about in Donbass quite a lot. They just want to be a sovereign people. They're very proud of who they are. The people that didn't leave because this is their home, and they're ready, and they have this passion and resilience to fight for their home. And I'm not the only one that went there. There are other people from other countries that didn't know each other. It's not like we got together and said, hey, we're going to go and we're going to all have the same exact story. No, I just actually interviewed a gentleman from Italy, actually, fam, an Italian, a real Italian. Today, he came into the studio. He went to Lugansk, which is again in the same region. But he went to Lugansk, and he was telling, you know, he basically said the same thing. He said, you know, this is just everything we are told about this conflict is a lie. And I didn't know him. I didn't even know there was an Italian going to Lugansk. And like, you know, Arno is, I'm going to talk to him tomorrow on RT. He's French. He went, I mean, these are the things that we are revealing. And two of our people who went with us went to the UN and testified in the UN. And I'm going to try to cut up some of the stuff so we see, because what was testified in the UN on, was it Sunday or Friday? I think Friday. I think it was Friday. Is troubling. Okay, there was a mother who lost her daughter, and her testimony. Not that I think the UN's going to do anything about it. I think it's just good to hear it. Her testimony was heartbreaking. It was just awful. Her daughter was around the same age as me, and like, it was just awful just to hear what happened to her, just for being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And the way she talked about what happened to her daughter, the way others have relayed how many times I've gone to the Donbass, what I've seen, the just everything. We're not making this up. These are groups of completely different people. And the people of the Donbass are just eager to show you what they went through, what they've gone through, their experience, and why they're doing what they're doing. It's the same way we've gone to Nicaragua, that we've heard the Sandinistas talk about U.S. intervention. It's the same type of thing. And then you understand why there was a Russian delegation in Nicaragua discussing sovereignty recently. And Lavrov brought that up today in his meeting with the South African foreign minister. And they were talking about Russia's relationship with Africa. And they were talking about why Africa wants to expand that relationship. It's just, these are the things. This is a common thread here on all the countries that have been completely just touched by Western interventionism.
Fam, I can't wait to get to the next section really quick. Let's just jump into it right away. I'm going to just say some really quick Super Rays and Rumble Rants. On Rumble Rant, we almost have like 90 people watching, fam. And we can tell you that Rumble is definitely a little bit more conservative because our top 3 videos over there, you're not in them. And that just shows you that we need more leftists to bring on over to Rumble because fam is not in the videos and that's our top 3 videos. But they are coronavirus stuff. Whitney Webb. So, that's it. The number 1 video is still.
I wish I would have been there.
You're supposed to be there.
I would have been there if I could have. Yeah.
Yes, Whitney Webb and Cynthia McKinney. I put a video up on YouTube. Hopefully, we won't get a strike. It's up there with its own film, its own thumbnail. So it's really cool. But we also have it on Rumble as well and on Rockfin if you're a premium subscriber. So please go over there on the Rumble Ramps. Mad Wolf hanging out. Welcome back, Fee. Glad you're back safe and sound. Pasta, you forgot to give us a hoo-ha. Well, fam, I left the soundboard over there, so I can't give him a hoo-ha. So I'll just do it from here. AREM, thank you for the Super Ray contribution. On Rockfin, we have 42 premium subscribers. If you are a premium subscriber, please watch on Rockfin. That helps us out with their algorithm, the finances, the whole 9 yards. Helps keep the electricity going, everything rocking and rolling for the Combo Couch to keep bringing you news. Combo Couch rocks. Independent journalism. This is from AREM. Always so good and always in good company. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, AREM and Game.film. Thank you so much for the Super Ray contribution, fam. It is always appreciated on the couch. Now, fam, it's always good to have 2 shows because if you don't get to something on one show, you can always get to it on the other. Now, for some people, they really thought this was a nothing burger, and they thought a lot of people wasted their time talking about this. I did not. I found this intriguing, and it took me a little while to get into the Crowder stuff several days after, and I was just reading like the messages from a lot of the conservatives on the right going at each other. Ben Shapiro going after your boy Ben Shapiro, right, fam? Going after Crowder, Candace Owens saying some stuff. Anomaly was chiming in and kind of bringing in some things that were going on. And I thought it was a little intriguing after I saw it. Because I think, and this is because I've been talking to a lot of Trump people. I went to that libertarian meeting on Friday and ended up having a lot of conversations with a Trumper, and we were agreeing on a lot of things, but we were disagreeing on one point. They still think that they're going to go into the Republican Party and that Donald Trump is there and that he's an agent for change and they're going to change things around. It's very much like what we experienced in 2020 when we still thought that Bernie Sanders had a second shot, that he was going to go in there and that he was going to be an agent of change and he was going to change the party from the inside. I think we learned quickly, especially from our side too as well, and I think the same exists on the right, that there's no movement from anybody to separate themselves from the establishment party. A lot of people who watch conservative media still think, and you have people like Levin who will say this shit, that the right-wing media is not established media, that it's on its own. Yet those people who constantly watch Fox, who constantly watch Tucker, who constantly watch all these other channels don't realize that their news is being sponsored by Pfizer, by Boeing, by Raytheon, and they don't have an independent mind to say what's going on. A lot of people who went to Rumble, fam, because now we're over on Rumble and stuff like that, really thought that they were going to say F you to YouTube, F you to Facebook, F you to Twitter, and not go back, that they were going to just build another parallel society of sorts. But from what was revealed from Crowder the other day is that they are baking the censorship right into the contracts. Now, a lot of stuff came out after Steven Crowder read a contract that was offered to him that he didn't take from Daily Wire, right? And it's showing you, and I'm going to play the one little clip right here because I think it needs to be an eye-opener from some of the conservatives out there who really thought they were just taking their ball and going home and never having to deal. No, all the contracts from the right are moving and hurting people, shepherding people right back into the establishment party by making sure that they still go on YouTube, by making sure they still go on Facebook. And the contracts that are coming with them, fam, that if you get a strike or if you get a spanking on YouTube, it affects your salary and your contract and your money. So what will they do then? Then once they get you into these contracts, they'll convince you to not say stuff on YouTube. Even though what we do is like, hey, we're going to get off YouTube right now. We're going to get off on Facebook because we can't say what we want to say. And we're not going to be censored. We're just not going to say it here. For us, using YouTube is simply a vessel to grab more fish and bring them into our other platforms where we can say what we want to say, a la Rockfin, a la Rumble. That is not the case with conservative media. They want you in those spaces permanently, which means at the end of the day, conservatives, you're going to get censored no matter what too as well. So even though this might seem like the cycle where you see the leftists or the establishment left, the Democrats acting so batshit crazy that you think the right wing is about opposing that, it's not. They're moving you into the same space. So family, let me play the video and get your thoughts on what you hear from Crowder. This was the day before he actually recorded a phone conversation, and the next day it played. This has about 1.5 million hits, I believe. I believe the next day video has like 2 million hits. And there were a lot of people that come out there, go after Crowder, say what a piece of crap he was, that he's being hypocritical, that he had people that he made them sign NDAs that they couldn't speak after they stopped working for him. And that might be the case. Candace Owens talked about it. Ben Shapiro talked about it. Owen Benjamin talked about it. But that still doesn't change the fact that the mainstream, what they're trying to sell you as news channels, as independent news channels on the right, they're not. They're part of the whole fucking plan to herd you back into censorship. So take a listen, and then we'll get your opinions right after. He's going to read the actual agreements in the contract on how you got to play ball with YouTube and Facebook. Take a look.
Big tech is in bed with big con. The people you thought, the people I thought were fighting for you, a lot of it has been a big con. Now, I'm specifically avoiding naming names or going after individuals in this video because I genuinely hope that those I'm addressing, and you know who you are, have a change of heart. Don't sign these contracts. I now know what you are signing out there. I have the luxury of not having to. Let me go through this. If any of the major platforms issues a content strike such that Crowder cannot be monetized on such platform, the fee will be reduced by 25%. And then another 20% of it happens on Apple. And then another 10% of it happens on Facebook. And then another 10% of it happens on Spotify. And then if you get a strike, meaning a suspension, another 20%. Just to drive it home, you get hit by a car, you have a sick day, you could lose $100,000 a day. This is what's sent out to everybody. Big tech is in bed with big con.
So, fam, I know it's very easy for us over here when we've been victims of demonetization, when we've been flagged, censored, punished for saying certain things. For us, it's very easy, but I don't think a lot of conservatives knew, and I still don't, and I still don't know if they understand. The fact is that they're being herded into the same bullshit, and it goes into Donald Trump. For me, it was easy to make this section together. Like, listen, conservatives, you're being played here. You think that you're going to these other platforms like Rumble, like Getter, to get away from the censorship? No. The big boys who are citing all your conservative media to come on up and to be a voice and to be heard, they're having rules put into play in which they have to censor themselves. Because once they say, okay, listen, if you get deplatformed, you get a strike on YouTube, you're going to lose 25% or you're going to lose 20%. What's going to happen? Eventually down the road, they're saying there's certain things you can't talk about. So it's being baked right into their media, and it's just another piece of evidence showing you, conservatives, this whole thought process about you going into the Republican parties, this is the populist right, and changing it, it's delusional. And I'm going to follow it up with the highlights of Donald Trump doing more bullshit to continue to dupe you. Fam, do you think it's a losing battle for these populist rights to go into the Republican Party thinking that they're going to actually change it? I mean, we did the same thing in the Democratic Party, no?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a losing battle. I just think they're actually more willing to try it than the Western U.S. left actually did at all. I mean, I do think they're a lot more cohesive. They're a lot more able to do it. If anybody is able to do it, I do think it's losing because they're still playing team sports, because they're still using the same strategy of divide and conquer, of focusing people on these culture war issues. rather than focusing them on the economic issues. And I think that's why you have the majority of people are okay with other people getting censored. We saw it when it came to the Twitter files. We saw it how, you know, Elon said, "Oh, no left voices are getting censored," and all these people are like, "Yeah, yeah." Well, it's so funny seeing all these leftists get completely, you know, or these liberals getting completely taken off Twitter. It's like, yeah, but you weren't okay with it when it was happening to you, so now you are. Like, it's just this double standard that happens all the time. And I just don't think it's legitimate. Like, I think people are just rooting for their team. And if you actually are against censorship, you're against censorship, whether they're a Republican, a Democrat, a communist, whatever. Like, and but that's not what you have here. And so that's why people are so easily suckered and bought into this whole spectrum of, oh, well, yeah, the censorship is it's okay as long as it's not happening to me. But the moment it happens to you, then
Yeah.
you know.
I thought it was really kind of like, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who really honestly thought that, and they still think like the conservative media is just like, you know, it's raging against the machine. It's the populist right. But all these people who are pulling the strings, including Donald Trump right now, because in my mind, Donald Trump is duping the populist right. Here, fam, this is 2023. Donald Trump talking about the vaccine. He's still there. He's still a vaccine salesman. Check this out. This is just the other.
President Trump, I want to ask you about the vaccines. You know the base, you know MAGA well. They're not happy with it. The CDC is now saying they're concerned about a link to strokes in the vaccine. We've also seen significant spikes in COVID-19 deaths after countries introduced the COVID vaccines. We have these sudden death spikes as well. Look, I know you take credit for getting the vaccines to the American people in record time. I got that. Will you acknowledge now, though, that the COVID-19 vaccines were not as safe or effective as we were told by the medical community at the time?
Well, what I did is, first of all, there were no mandates with me, and I had absolutely no mandates, and the governors were allowed to do what they want. Most Republican governors did the right thing, and most Democrat governors didn't, you know, with the lockdowns and all the other things they did, including their views of the vaccine. Proven to save a lot of lives. Some people say I saved 100 million lives worldwide, but I was able to get that done in 9 months versus 5 years to 12 years, if it ever got done. I got the FDA to do things that it was pretty amazing what we were able to do. But as far as using it, as far as the utilization, I never demanded anybody use it. I never had a mandate, and I think that's very important to know. And I never had anybody, for instance, when I said, you know, I never said close up. I never said we're going to close our country up. A lot of Republicans, now Florida did close for a period of time, as you know, but a lot of states run by Republican governors didn't close at all, and that was okay with me. I let them make that decision.
What about the safety aspect? That's what people are concerned about now. Do you have some concerns about the safety of these vaccines?
Well, I always do, but you have to understand there are the pros and cons. If you could read some reports saying it was the greatest thing that's ever happened and we saved tens of millions of lives, then you'll read other reports. You'll say there was some problems with the vaccines in terms of certain things, but relatively small numbers. But you know, you have many reports that say the vaccine saved tens of millions of lives. That without the vaccines, you wouldn't have, you know, you would have had a thing like we had in 1917, where perhaps 100.
He's still duping him, fam. This is 2023, dude, and he's still. Some people are saying it could save hundreds of thousands of lives, fam. It's it. I mean, how is this guy anti-establishment when he's leading you right back into the same bullshit? Because remember, the whole thing is Donald Trump is a lone wolf. He's an outsider. Your thoughts on his position on the vaccine?
Well, Donald Trump is clearly a WEF globalist, blah, 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 blah. I mean, if that's all you're basing it on, then I'm just making fun of, you know, I'm just saying, like, you know, it's kind of funny that he's saying this. I mean, you could take that from any, you know, left-leaning or Democrat or liberal and apply it. Yeah, I mean, I mean, he did say he's against mandates, which I'm good with, but at the same time, he's slightly pushing it in order to be okay. And that's the thing, like even today at this point, you're still going to have pretty much every major politician push the vaccine. You just are. It's still, even in spite of everything that's come out, you're just going to have the majority of them do that. That's just a reality. That's just what it is. And this is why this issue to me is just, it's just so, you can't, I'm not a single issue person. And so, but I think the whole issue for me is the whole mandate situation. Like it shouldn't be something that's mandated. Obviously, I don't expect politicians to actually speak out against it because I think that would be political suicide for the general public. I still think, a lot of people know, but I think the general public would consider it political suicide in the United States. Maybe in other countries it's different, but especially in the United States, it's just.
Remember when Bernie Sanders said this and it just erased everybody, and everybody who was a Bernie supporter, it was like kind of like, all right, that's it. Joe Biden is my friend. Like he refused to go after him inside the debates. At this point, like that whole accusation that Bernie Sanders wants to be a friend of Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer, it really kind of set into a lot of us Bernie people. We were really upset by it. Well, Donald Trump has his own thing, and his little boy Bannon talked about it right over here. Fam, did you know that Donald Trump was about to have his first rally in South Carolina? And guess who he invited to come to town? Bannon on Lindsey Graham. Why is the dangerous anti-America First twerp part of President Trump's kickoff in South Carolina, and why is he even included on the team? And here you go, got Bannon on his getter, I believe it is. Lindsey Graham pushed for and voted for the $1.7 trillion omnibus bill. His primary season. Massive spending increase, including more support for the Ukraine war. Now Graham is in Ukraine publicly pushing for American battle tanks that will only escalate the war. Why is this dangerous anti-American first twerp part of President Trump's kickoff in South Carolina, and why is he even included on the team? So here comes Donald Trump, the anti-establishment guy, and he has Lindsey Graham, fam, hanging out with him and opening up on the team in South Carolina. I mean,
yeah,
he's moving you back into the establishment.
He is, but it's not like what's his name isn't like a Zionist, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they all play their part. They all play their part at all times. I mean, I do think like they're all playing a role. Perhaps this guy is pushing DeSantis. We'll see how that turns out, because DeSantis is the other player, and I think DeSantis is far worse. So, but it seems like to me it's just this theatrical wrestling match between these members of the Republican Party, and one of them will be the one that is selected and selected to go against the other selected idiot Democrat, and Americans will get to feel like they actually chose democracy or had some sort of semblance of democracy, when really we know that we don't. So yeah. I do think like all of them played their part, whether it's Steve Crowder, whether it's Steve Bannon, whether it's Donald Trump or DeSantis. They all play their part, just like all the liberals and these progressives play their part. It's honestly like that's all they are. I mean, they're all actors, they're all playing a role. And Zelensky, of course, is the prime actor right now in Ukraine. And you can see how if they can create a politician out of an actor like Zelensky, what do you think your politicians are? You're not immune from it. Your country creates them. So.
Well, it's funny because the common denominator is Israel, whether it be Bannon, Posobiec, Lindsey Graham. Let's take a look at this video here. Look at just bowing down the knee to Israel. Here's Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham.
And no one has done more for Israel than you, Senator Lindsey Graham. He is a stalwart champion of our alliance, and we have no better friend. So I want to thank you for everything you've been doing over the years on our defenses, our security, on Iran. You've been a tremendous friend, tremendous ally.
Thank you.
Welcome.
The eyes and ears of America is Israel. You talk about the Five Eyes, they're important allies, but nobody does
He means
more to protect
intelligence.
America from radical Islam than our friends in Israel. And I just want you to know this sign says all you need to know about my trip. To every American, what happens with Iran matters to not only to America, but to the world. The worst possible outcome for the world is to allow the Iranian regime to acquire nuclear capability, because our Arab friends will not tolerate that. They feel far more threatened by Iran than they do Israel. So my hope is to find an alternative to the JCPOA that will allow for nuclear power, but not create a nuclear arms race through enrichment. And that's the existential threat to the state of Israel and the world writ large. So what can you expect, my friends in Israel, in the next coming days and weeks from Washington? More.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And no one.
Common denominator, fam. Common denominator.
Yeah.
Oh, there,
Yeah.
there they are. You know.
Yeah. And yeah, including Bannon, who you showed. I mean, he's definitely
Oh
a
yeah.
pro-Israel guy. So it's hilarious that he's criticizing Graham. Okay. Anyway.
So let's just dive right into this right here, fam, because with all the other stuff going on, and thank you guys for supporting the Convo Couch. Any way you can look to support it, you know what to do. Go over to our Rockfin right now. We have about 40 people over there. Those are all premium members. If you can afford to sign up for the monthly subscription, please do so. We're also on Rumble. We have about 80 people over there. Been growing that site, and of course on YouTube we're about 240 people. Got a great crowd to welcome back Fee to Moscow. And it's so funny welcoming her back to Moscow because she went to the Donbass and now she's back. But fam, we see all these people. It's kind of funny. We went through this whole situation where, and I released the election files about Brazil, explaining the differences between Brazil's Bolsonaro election and Donald Trump's 2020 election. So it was very interesting. But all these people crying about Brazil, and I say, fam, how come you're not crying about Peru? Why are you so silent on Peru? And we hear crickets. So what do you got over here?
So I'm going to be tying a little bit of what's going on in Donbass. I sort of have been doing it already to what's going on in Peru. Not because it's the only events that are U.S. intervened or that are U.S. backed. We could talk about Palestine, we could talk about Syria, talk about Iran. You know, we could go on and on and on because the U.S. intervention has been doing this for a long time. But I wanted to play this video by Casacho News, where basically the Russian military equipment that belongs to Russia's Latin American allies, the U.S. wants to take away and give it to Ukraine. Just first of all, there's a couple of things wrong there. One, the U.S. has no jurisdiction over what these other countries have, but it still thinks it does. And two, just to put this in perspective as to who's really the evil one here when it comes to this conflict. I mean, I posted something about the Donbass pasta. When I posted that, people were like, yeah, but, you know, Russia. I mean, it was just, I just got so angry. So let's hear this, I forget her name, but she is a U.S. military intelligence goon.
Yeah.
And she basically is just letting everybody know that what the U.S. wants to do with Latin Americans facilities that they say are Russia, Russian equipment, and whoever they decide are Russia's allies in Latin America.
If I talk to my number two adversary in the region, Russia, I mean, I've got, of course, the countries, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua with Russia relationships. But what I really look at, and 6 other countries, by the way, so a total of 9 that have Russian equipment in them. And we're working to replace that Russian equipment with United States equipment if those countries want to donate it to Ukraine or the cause that's happening, and be able to replace that with U.S. equipment. If I
It's just comical at this fucking point. That's the #1 commander in Latin America, ladies and gentlemen, by the United States military, right? They like literally want. Well, you know, fam, the Ukrainians over there probably can operate the Russian machinery better than the new machinery. You know, we've already given new machinery, but to donate it, I mean, does the term "the balls" on this woman. I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
Just the audacity of
It's-
thinking you can just dictate what these people, oh, not just Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. Now there's 6 other countries, I'm assuming they're talking about pretty much any of the other progressive countries that they say are, allies to Russia, because the vast majority of Latin America has refused to condemn Russia in the same way that the EU has. Gee, I wonder why. And so this is again just why. What makes you think you have jurisdiction? I thought neo-colonialism ended, but it didn't, guys. It didn't. And today, again, to reiterate, Sergei Lavrov said himself that the United States literally wants to exert a new neo-colonial policy on Africa. This is why they're sending their envoys to Africa right now, because they're seeing Africa work with Russia, Africa work with China. They're seeing BRICS. They're like, oh shit, no, this is what's going on here, and they don't want this. But unfortunately for them, they have no problem. African countries have no problem working with Russia or China because they feel the relationship is more equitable. I'm not saying that it's free of any troubles, especially in relation to China, but I am saying they definitely see it as a more equitable partnership, especially with Russia going back to the Soviet era, where they did liberate a lot of these countries from colonial rule. And right now, the French are having a hard time staying in their previous colonies because people want them out. And so this is exactly what's going on in the world. So this is why I said what I said. I said the world is witnessing innocents dying at the hands of corrupt US-backed governments, one via Ukraine's Nazi attacks in the Donbass, and the other via a wannabe dictatorship in Peru. I said it's surreal that 2 regions so far apart are both deeply affected by Western intervention. That must end. And I've been covering both of these conflicts simultaneously. I really want to go to Peru right now. I'm getting so much information from a family, from other people that are covering it. We're going to have some guests on this week. I'm going to try to hold the space on Peru because it's so important. I don't want the lack of attention that happened in Bolivia in 2019 to happen again. We're finally getting some more media attention on this. I've been covering it on RT whenever I can, whenever I'm there. I always try to make sure that it's highlighted, but there's so much going on that people aren't talking about. So because a lot of this is, of course, Spanish media, and they use Chinese phones and Chinese apps there. So it's kind of hard to find. But this is a university. It's called San Marcos University. And so police entered this university and just arrested people, not just people who were protesting, these student protesters, because they want the removal of the vice president who became president, but they arrested delegations. And so here's a video, and you can just play it, and I'll talk as it plays, fam, because yeah, it's in Spanish, so I'll go ahead and be able to highlight it. So one thing I want to highlight is that universities in Peru are they're one of the entities respected when it comes to protests. So if you're going to protest somewhere in Peru, the safest place you can protest, or you can have some sort of demonstration, are universities. And so that was completely violated by this. And they're saying they're persecuting people, and they're using tear gas, and there they are. You can see the pictures there. So like I said, I've had some people on Peru. I've had at least 2 people on Peru. I've had a lot of information just coming in. So I think it's over, fam. I think you can shut it off. And we're going to keep following this, and we're going to keep having guests on, because what's been happening now is, like I said, they're arresting students. Lima has gotten massively just into these demonstrations. Obviously, the outer regions continue to protest. But now the question people are asking is Peru on the verge of civil war? Because many people were expecting these protests to die out. Okay, well, Castillo's out. Now what are they going to do? Oh, now they want Boluarte out. But it's not just about Boluarte. It's about the fact that they don't feel this government is a just government. They feel that this is an attempt at a dictatorship. You can see these pictures here. It's about the fact that they know Congress is corrupt. They know that Pedro Castillo has no charges that he's actually being held on. They know that the Congress is going to continue to do this for whoever's the next president, because this has happened the last 8 times. And so now what you have is people demanding a government that represents them. And that is as, revolutionary as it goes back to. If the government doesn't represent you, you have the ability to remove it. That was in the Declaration of Independence of the United States, by the way. If the government fails to do its job by and for the people have a right to remove that government. That is in the Declaration of Independence. It's pretty much outlined in our Constitution of the United States for people who want to talk about the Constitution. So when you talk about Peru's Constitution, it's a Fujimori era backed Constitution. Fujimori was, of course, the last dictator. And so you have people trying to really push for regaining their country, and especially amidst the exploitation of the country's natural resources, among them, of course, the biggest one being lithium. And that, of course, tells you everything you need to know about why the United States is so interested in this country. You're muted.
I was going to say, fam, I'm just all over the place here. I was going to say also the drug trade got something to do with it. I don't think the CIA wants to give up their drug trade. That's something that Pedro Castillo talked about, something that we have to factor into as well. This whole Donald Trump saying that he's going to go after the cartels. I just look at it. I was talking about it with Danny Shaw yesterday. They're just going to manufacture more consent to go into these other countries by blaming cartels to go in there and overturn the governments, to put in their own puppets to make sure that they can get all these resources like the lithium and cobalt. But what do you say to somebody, fam, who says no? Because this happened at the end of that one Twitter space I was in, because I also mentioned Peru, saying everybody's crying about Brazil because it's CIA, yada, yada, yada. And yet Peru, Lisa Kenna shows up a couple days after, anoints the new president over there, says, go along with business, get rid of Castillo. We've had a history of 5 or 6 of the last Peruvian presidents to end up in jail. A lot of the times they were trying to do something what Pedro Castillo was doing, right? And not to say that Pedro Castillo doesn't come without any criticisms, the way he kind of turned his back on his party at first, tried to work with everybody. The kind of narrative or the rhetoric we heard in Lima when we were there, when we were talking to a lot of the waiters, the bartenders and whatnot, is that Pedro Castillo came off as weak. I don't think there were supporters of a lot of supporters of Pedro Castillo in Lima because, although we didn't get a chance this particular time to experience the rest of Peru, you've been there before. You've said to me, Pasta, Lima is not Peru. Lima is just the capital in Peru. Peru is big. It has a lot of indigenous people, and they all don't think the same way as you'll see a lot of these people who are going to be pushing back against Castillo. But what do you say to the person, because this is what was said at the end of that Twitter space? No, Pedro Castillo broke the law. He violated the Constitution, and he tried to have a legislative coup. What do you say to those people?
Pedro Castillo literally never actually did it. He was considering doing it, but the thing is, he fell into this trap because he had been a victim to this attempt of getting rid of him, putting a bunch of accusations that really had no ground against him, or they would have already gotten him on it from the beginning, from the moment he won, because of the things he said about the drug trade, about the lithium, about the mining and the multinational corporations. He threatened the big business aspect, and the people in charge in Congress are primarily people who are neoliberal, who want Peru to become just a Western, ally. They want to put Peru in that situation. And so the people in the outer regions of Peru who work in these mines, who understand that these resources that are being extracted from the country need to stay in the country in order to create a better life for the people of the country, that's why they supported Castillo. That's why they support, those policies. But some other people who are saying that, Pasta, wouldn't be saying that if Castillo was a Bolsonaro. They would. They're not saying it because they actually think that. They're saying it because, he's known as a leftist. What I say to these people is what is left in Peru is completely different than what is left in the United States. I mean, in Peru, Castillo was chastised by some of the more
Leftist.
social justice leftist for not being pro-abortion. He's anti-abortion. He's religious. They're definitely more conservative. And like in Peru, it is the same here in Russia in terms of what is left in Russia, what is communist in Russia. You know, they're not there on the trans agenda. They're not there on the drug agenda. They're definitely more religious, like not everybody, but it's just this whole thing of what is considered one thing or another needs to stop. In the West, it's one thing. Outside of the West, it's a whole other thing. Mostly it means we don't want to be backed by US intervention. We want to be able to get out of issues on our own. We want to have national sovereignty. We want our resources to stay in our countries and help our people. We don't want to be exploited. It means we don't want neoliberal agendas coming in. It means we want to maintain our cultural entity, our cultural sovereignty. That's what it means. It means something completely different. It doesn't mean we're going to, push feminism and push all of what we consider to be liberal leftist agendas in the West. It's two completely different things. So people need to understand that and stop trying to fit the Western political ideology that is just so like, black and white, or it's just so hyper partisan into the politics of every other country that is completely different. So I do think like that the people that say that about Brazil, that are so outraged about Brazil, but are not outraged about what's happening in Peru, are again employing that team sports mentality where they're like, oh, it's because it's some lefty crazy person that we don't like, then it's okay and blah blah blah. So we're gonna go and pretend that this is justified. I mean, Castillo didn't do anything that is actually valid according to not just his lawyers, but other people who study the law. There is nothing holding him, really incriminating him. He's in prison because they want him to be in prison, because they want to keep him out. But at the end of the day, does he deserve to be in prison? No. And this is much bigger than him. This is not about Castillo. This is about what was done and how people, the elected choice that people supported was not respected from day one.
National sovereignty.
And that the people of Peru feel like they're being exploited by multinational corporations that are foreign and Western. That the United States came in, that the OAS came in and automatically placed their seal of approval on in the CIA specifically, because Lisa Kenna is CIA. Into this new government, that their fingerprints were all over it, and that the world is, of course, the Western world, the international rules-based order is eerily quiet about this whole thing. And then, of course, you add the fact that lithium and copper and silver and gold and all of these natural resources that are in Peru, in Latin America, are going to be very, very important for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And you have a whole recipe as to why you should be outraged about this, especially if you are against the WEF globalist agenda. So there's just no justification for this.
Yeah. And really quickly before we play this video, because you got it up there, I think it's amazing. And the three things, fam, that we know from the protesters, and a lot of the indigenous people from the outskirts coming in, and they're ready to march up to Lima, and they said they're not going to stop until they get what they want. Number one, they want the vice president to immediately step down. Number two, they want snap elections, meaning a new Congress, elections across the board for the top of the ticket being the president, their parliamentary system. And number three, and this is something that I think is very key, because this is something that Ali Vargas kind of alluded to, and we made sure we point out, is that they want that constitution changed. They understand that constitution has been used as a mechanism by the West to keep in power who they want, also to dully up and take away their resources and give it to multinational corporations. Do you not think, fam, at this point, though, that probably is one of the most important things? Because I've heard you say this before. You've been waiting for a president to come along and change that constitution. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I said, the Constitution is just from the Fujimori era. It's a Fujimorista constitution. It's not a good constitution. And that constitution and the Congress have too much power. The Congress in particular has more power than the president. Not a single president has been able to govern effectively or ineffectively. They haven't been able to govern because the Congress decides who stays and who goes. And if the president doesn't play ball with whatever they want, they get rid of him. That's exactly what's happened. I can't say that none of these presidents were weren't corrupt, but I can tell you not all of them were corrupt. It's impossible that every single president is the problem. It's obviously the Congress and the neoliberal international order that is in power in the country of Peru that has pretty much just is destroying the country in terms of the people of the outer regions, because they call them indios, feos, cholos,
Yeah.
all of these things that we heard in if you recall back during the embassy in DC when that was going on in Venezuela, we saw that guy yell at Aminta and call her a bunch of names. Well, it's the same type of rhetoric. I mean, it's the same type of rhetoric that we see. But guess what? These cholos, these people that live in the inner regions of the country, are the ones that produce the food people eat. So you know what's going on is the people in Lima are freaking out now. This is why you're seeing all this unrest, because their food, and Peru is known internationally for the food. I mean, Pasta can tell you the food is like among the most delicious in the entire world. Russians rave about the food in Peru here. I mean, I'm not even joking. The people in Lima aren't getting food. And that is when you start seeing people get pissed off. I know I get hangry, and Pasta knows this, when I haven't eaten in a while. I can only imagine like thousands of people just not being able to eat like the food that the Peruvians rely on. All jokes aside, potatoes, corn, fish, the production of this agriculture, it disrupts the whole system. They have stopped working. The people that deliver your food, that get your food, have stopped working. So that's how you disrupt the system, guys. Take note, especially in the United States. You want to disrupt the entire government and the system, mess with people's food, because the moment people can't eat, I mean, if Pasta can't have access to his vegan food, he's going to go insane. It's just not going to go well for you.
Yeah, that was the first comment. I put it up there. I get hangry AF. Let's play this video here. Fam, you can translate. I'll keep the volume low. Convo Couch, guys, you know what to do. Share the link. Share it out there. We're on Rumble. We're on Rockfin. We're at where all the cool kids are at. We're on YouTube right now because we didn't say anything about elections or COVID, so we can speak freely today. But that ain't where it's at. Check it out. This is in Peru, the school, once again.
Precisamente los universitarios, la comunidad universitaria organizándose, está congregándose esta tarde para solidarizarnos con lo acontecido en San Marcos.
So the community is organizing to stand against what is going on right now with Dina Boluarte.
Apelen a sus contactos, apelen a sus redes.
Go against mainstream media. Go and talk to your contacts. There has been a violation on campus grounds. They have the police have literally broken into the university and taken it down. We are not delinquents. We are students. And like students, we deserve to be heard. We have a legitimate protest and a proposal.
¿Cómo toman este accionar de la policía? ¿Es una represión a lo que vienen siendo las protestas en la ciudad de Lima?
Visiblemente.
Is this a repression against the protests in the city of Lima? He said, possibly. It's visibly a validation. It's an imposition of the force, of the power from the armed forces. We're not going to allow this.
Parte de la comunidad universitaria, historiador y conoce y sabe, al igual que todos mis compañeros, que lo que ha pasado hoy ha pasado ya.
And we know what happened today.
Por eso pregunto a todos, le pregunto a
shouldn't have
todos,
happened.
¿estamos acaso repitiendo lo que ya ha pasado en la década del 90 del siglo XX, señores?
Are we repeating what happened in the 1990s? He's referring to Fujimori.
Lo que ha pasado hoy en San Marcos es visiblemente
what happened today in San Marcos was an abuse.
No puede estar exenta o exonerada de la lucha, puesto que lo que ha pasado en San Marcos podría en
what happened today
a cualquier universidad.
Could happen anywhere in any university. So basically, he was saying, we are students, we are not criminals or terrorists. And he's a historian from the National University of San Agustín de Arequipa, okay? And so this is not Arequipa. I just want to clarify. This is not Arequipa. It's a different city in Lima. So they are standing in solidarity with what happened in Lima, in the University of San Marcos. So because of what happened in San Marcos, all of these students are across the board organizing and protesting against this. Why? Because like I said, they started detaining students who were calling for the removal of Dina Boluarte. They started detaining students who were protesting. The fact that young people are involving themselves now, students, people who go to universities, is a big deal, because usually, like I said, in a lot of these countries, it's not the youth, and now it's like, you know, a bigger thing. So just to highlight that's been happening all over.
We got a video from Danny Shaw, fam, over here.
Yes.
Solidarity with Peru against the U.S.-backed coup and the massacre of 50 protesters. The thing that's crazy to me is that a lot of people in the West are like, oh no, Castillo committed a crime, that's what's going on. It's like, no, and you're not listening to the people of Peru. The people of Peru are saying to you loud and clear they don't want Western intervention anymore, regardless of their discrepancies with Castillo. You want to call him an asshole. He was their asshole, and the West has no choice to go remove him. So I think we should open our eyes and ears and listen. Take a look, fam. Danny Shaw's video. I'm going to play it right now. We love Danny Shaw. Love me some Danny Shaw. Hope you're doing well. You can always tell Peru by those beautiful hats, fam.
You're good.
Nunca começa a deixar com cara, nunca paga quanto por isso. Nunca explica
She's saying no one is financing us. We're not going to allow them to keep stepping over us like they've done in the past. Nobody is paying us. We are organizing. They've abandoned our children. This government has abandoned our children. We're going to do this till we die. We all come to fight. We are traveling to enforce our rights. You guys can see it. Where is this organization in the West? I see some of it in Europe because people are freezing. They can't. I mean, my friend from Spain was telling me how like they barely turn the heater on. They like literally ration the heater, and how in Russia we're all like, literally it's so hot you have to open the window because of the heating. So I see the EU doing it. You know, we see it in the yellow vest. The United States is just, come on, guys, take some notes, guys. I mean, these people, look how they are. Together. They barely have resources. And they're using mutual aid, leftists are using mutual aid to get this stuff done. I'm just saying, like, when is it going to be time, guys? Look at the billions that they're getting for Zelensky's coke habit.
When they seized that fucking coke over in freaking goddamn Bolivia or wherever the hell they were, the DEA, it's like sending it right to Ukraine. But look how the West kind of reports on this shit. This is from Zero Hedge. Peru closes famed Machu Picchu ruins. Tourists trapped as anti-government unrest spreads. And I got a picture of that historic building out over there, fam. Protests in Peru growing more violent and engulfing much of the country beyond the region of the South, where the first started and were concentrated last month following the impeachment and imprisonment of then-President Pedro Castillo. Castillo still detained on charges of seeking to lead a rebellion after trying to dissolve the Congress replaced by now President Boluarte, who had served as vice president until being sworn in under emergency conditions on December the 7th, and sworn in with the blessings of the West, as we know.
Yeah.
Lisa Kenna showed on up.
And
go ahead, please.
Let me just say real quick, the protests aren't violent. What's violent is the targeting of protesters by the government, by the military of the government, and by the police of the government that is backed by the United States. And Boluarte, and I will get to this really quickly, Boluarte was pushed to do this by the United States and by other members of the Peruvian elite. So this is, again, something that people weren't aware of until recently. She was actually wanting to step down, but they're not allowing her to step down because she is the fall guy. She's the one that is now there. And that's all this is, guys. So this isn't, I really hate the violent protest. No, the protest itself is not violent. These people are just out there. I mean, what do these people have? They have rocks, they have
Water.
hats, they have water. I mean, please tell me how these people are being violent. They're not being violent. The violence is coming from the government, and it's U.S. backed, which is why a lot of people like Danny, like Camilla, like Ollie keep highlighting this. This is a U.S. backed coup, and for people who are against U.S. intervention, you have to make sure you understand what that means. That's why those people were saying it in that video. Nobody's funding us. This isn't like some, NGO funded Shanghai protest that is getting all the media attention. This is like people from the country actually saying, hey, we don't want this shit. We don't want to be intervened. And there's a difference between a genuine self-created protest, because notice how the media covers it, and then a protest that's funded by Western-backed interests, and you can see the difference.
Fam, in LA, our boy Abraham Marquez, what's up, Abe? Got some of these Peruvians in Los Angeles, California are delivering a letter to Peru's consulate addressed to Dina Boluarte. The letter denounces the killings and human rights violations by the Peru security forces and demands Boluarte's resignation. Reporting by Abraham Marquez. Fam, I love the colors. I love what they wear in Peru. Some of the indigenous people, let's check it out.
I got to say, there's a good amount of Peruvians in LA, and I learned that they were doing demonstrations. One of the girls that went with Johnny and I, the trip you got sick, she told me about this. There's been lots of organizing going on. There's going to be another event organized by New York and Washington, D.C. coming together. There's these things happening, and I'm glad people are mobilizing to really draw attention to things that normally don't get attention. Hopefully we've learned since 2019, since before that with the Venezuelan embassy, to really talk about these things. And again, these issues, if you're interested in globalism and what the WEF is doing, this is part of it. And I just wanted to again reiterate, Dina Boluarte was the president from Pedro Castillo's party. Then she got kicked out for several reasons. She's got corruption charges too. But the translation isn't well. I not Google Translate. I did the translation, but I can pretty much say that she has not capitalized on the political landscape that voted for Pedro Castillo, and then instead, of course, moved to the right to sort of just placate to the centrists. And she tried to get, and you can go on the next picture, she tried to leave. She tried to resign the office, but she wasn't allowed by this. Hold on. If you go back up for a second, there it is.
This one here?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, one more up. Sorry. Yeah. So a little bit. Hold on. Sorry. I wish I could control it. Just go down a little bit where it says yellow, where it's text.
Gotcha.
Okay, there it is. Okay, so she tried to resign on 2 opportunities. Okay, and she was not allowed by this gentleman. If you just scroll really quick, I'll let you know. Right here. His name is, he was the president of the Council of Ministers, Alberto Otarola Peñaranda. And he said, if you do not, the premier would become, if she did not leave she could not leave the presidency, claiming that she would be prosecuted if she did. So the translation isn't well, but basically she would be prosecuted if she left the presidency, and she may face up to 20 years in prison after leaving the presidency. So she's the fall guy. She's the one that they're going to go after, essentially. She tried to leave. They're not allowing her to leave. It just shows how corrupt everything is. And again, selling out to these people was never going to do her any favors, but that's essentially what's going on. We're going to keep following this. We're going to have other guests on. There's so many more videos coming in from Peru and from just people doing this in independent journalism, this activism.
Yeah.
I have a contact right now in Peru, and yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and we're going to keep covering this because it's important. So I'm covering that. I'm covering Donbass. Like I said, I'll be working on some stuff, and I work at RT. So bear with me, guys. The information will be out as well.
So, fam, that's it for today. It's been a long show. You got to get some rest. Scott, we want to thank our guest, Scott Horton, for joining us today. It was an amazing show. Fun stuff to go over. Be back on the morning show, too, as well. T-Lab Tuesday will be going on. Jimmy wanted me to come on the show Saturday and talk about Peru, but I was actually went out drinking on Friday, fam, and I didn't get the message until it was too late. So I didn't get to go on Saturday. But I'm going to hit up with Ali and Danny and Camilla. Kasachwa News, guys, great source on the ground. Ali's there right now. He's on the show. And Camilla is still over in Brazil. So great information if you guys want to get the scoop of what's going on. We love their news. Kasachwa News, go check it out. Danny Shaw, go check his stuff out. Danny is actually someplace cool, too, as well right now, fam. So anyways, will you be back on the desk tonight, or what can we expect? Where can we find the Fiorella Isabel on our Tizzle?
This week I'm on from the time it's like late for you guys to watch. It's 2 to 7 Moscow time. So it's kind of late for you guys.
Yeah, 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning for you people in what you call it, 4 a.m. to 9 a.m. for the East Coasters. So you can check it out if you're up in those crazy hours. Go check out Fiorella. For Pasta Jardula, Fiorella, fam. It's great having you back. I'm glad you're home. I'm glad you had an amazing time. And guys, still, if you want to help out too, the Gifts and Go is still available. We have to put a new one up, fam. I need your help so we can put it up for Cuba. Cuba is in March.
Yeah.
Been speaking Terry Matson's. Go check out her show on Thursday nights, fam. What the F is going on?
Happening.
And she's been having problems with the restream, but we're gonna fix all that out and make sure that Thursday nights you can go check it out. She's one of our companions that when we go travel across seas, a lot of times she's with us. We got Cuba coming up, so that's going to be a great thing. I'm so glad that we went to Brazil, fam. I was told that next Saturday there might be a Brazil space, Twitter space to go on, so I might go on that. I released the election files talking about the differences in the elections. I can talk about the framework about these elections left and right because they keep moving the goalposts, keep coming up with new accusations. But guess what? Unfortunately for you guys, the Convo Couch was on the ground. The Convo Couch knows elections, so we can beat back your bullshit with nothing but the truth. Thank you so much for watching today. We'll see you later, fam. Let the people know.
Yeah. By the way, Thursday, there might be a Twitter space. I probably won't have time to do it tomorrow, but Thursday it will allow me more time to do a Twitter space on Peru. So if you know somebody that wants to talk about Peru or that have somebody there, whether they're a journalist, an activist, please let me know. I am going to try this Twitter space, fam, and I want you to be on there because I think it's important that you also lend your knowledge about Peru and how it's the similarities to the Latin American countries you've been to as well. And of course on elections. But fam is going to be against Rage Against the War Machine anti-war rally in DC on February 19th.
Yeah. I'm going to be going there. A lot of good stuff going on. This is that whole anti-imperialist left combining with libertarians like Scott Horton, which, we're going to get after Scott Horton. Fam, we got to figure out what's going on Wednesday. I really want you on that panel. But if not, Caleb Maupin will be in the building to talk about communism, and the two libertarians will be Spike Cohen and Dave Smith. It's going to be lit, fam. But for those who make it out to this on February the 19th, Jimmy Dore, Medea Benjamin, you can see him right there. Scott Horton. Look at these guys over here. Garland Nixon, my man. David Swanson, an old school anti-war activist, kind of like on the lines of like Don DeBar of sorts, where I believe he's a Marxist. I'm not sure 100%. Daniel McAdams, that's a Ron Paul Liberty Institute dude. Love Daniel McAdams' work. Fam had a show with him. Max and Anya, you know they've been on the show before. Supreme from the Wu-Tang Clan, fam. Scott Ritter, Tara Reid, and a musician, Diana Sarah. She'll be there. Kim Iverson, Jackson Hinkle, Matthew Ho will be there as well. And now you can add my name to the list, fam. I will be speaking there February 19th. Kind of important, I think, because of the work we've been doing, shows like we had today, fam, where we're willing to get people with different ideologies together to come together to talk about the common grounds. I think that's why I've been able to earn a spot to go there, because we've been doing that work over here at the Combo Couch, proudly so, while we've been using you guys to help us get on the ground and cover these elections. It's been amazing. It's amazing that fam got to go to the Donbass. There's just more to come from the Combo Couch this year, fam. It's going to be very exciting, fam. It's going to be lit, fam. Your thoughts before we get on out?
Fam, don't say lit, fam. All right.
Yeah,
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Much love, and keep a lookout for the Donbass and Peru stuff. I'm out.
Bye, guys.